Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1273 of the War News stream. And it feels like we just saw y'all yesterday, which we did, of course, on a special Monday stream. But tonight we got in very big news that Ukraine has drone striked once again near Moscow and the border regions. Also, Putin is trying to set up Zelensky in Moscow with a meeting, and Iran is facing major water and economic crises at the exact same time. We have major news tonight, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear that officially today, the Armed Forces of Ukraine, as a part of the 1st National Guard Corps of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, have officially liberated the Zoloti Kolodyaz Pocket north of the city of Pokrovsk and near to the town of Dobropilya. This is a massive strategic and tactical victory for the Armed Forces of Ukraine, with the remnants of the battalion of the 132nd Motorized Rifle Regiment now retreating to the area of the pocket of Kucheriv Yar, now coming under significant fire from the fighting 93rd Brigade, which has now been charged and tasked with the responsibility of destroying in detail the remaining elements of this battalion of the 132nd Brigade, and also forcing the remnants of this battalion, if possible, to surrender. We have also been able to hear at the exact same time that the Russian Federation has come under another massive drone attack overnight, with the Volgograd refinery now being hit for the 8th or 9th time in a row, once again ensuring that the oil refinery is knocked out. While all of this has been going on in Ukraine, the Islamic Republic of Iran is now undergoing crippling water shortages, as Iranian government officials on state TV today admitted that there was a small clerical error inside of the water distribution tablets or information that was distributed to the Iranian government, and it now appears that 370,000 citizens within the city of Khorrambad have been completely deprived of any sort of water for the next several days due to this minor clerical error. We have also been able to hear that simultaneously the Islamic Republic of Iran is going through a crippling spurring not only a water shortage, but a natural gas shortage as well, with several 100,000 cubic meters of natural gas now being seen as a significant shortage. We have also been able to hear that the Iranian stock market is now withdrawn or fallen around 22% over the past 3 months, while a major explosion was also reported in Mashhad earlier today as well. We have also been able to hear that the Islamic Republic of Iran, despite all of the setbacks and serious developments that are currently happening inside of their country, are continuing to take a hostile stance against the state of Israel and the United States of America, further working on their threats of war and stating that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has gone through massive updates and upgrades since the 12-day war and will be ready to deal a deadly blow to the state of Israel or the United States if either one attempts to tango with the Islamic Republic of Iran. At the exact same time, U.S. Special Forces have conducted a operation or raid for the larger part near to the city of Idlib, with helicopters being reported near to the area of Aleppo and intermittent sounds of gunfire coming from the outskirts of Idlib within a concentrated area, heavily suggesting counterterrorism operations being conducted by the United States within the area, which is nothing unheard of, and this is actually somewhat common for the area of the Syrian interim government or the Syrian Arab Republic, which it formerly once was. Fighting has also broken out once again with the nation of Lebanon and Syria around the area of the Baalbek Valley, as Hezbollah forces appear to once again be engaging in firefights across the border, from what we've been able to hear in reports. We have also been able to hear that the Israelis are continuing to move forward with their attempts at the occupation of the Gaza Strip here within the next few weeks. The People's Republic of China will also be unveiling a new intercontinental ballistic missile during the upcoming military parade, which is going to be celebrating an anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China's People Liberation Army, or generally as well, the founding of the People's Republic of China, which occurred on October of 1945. We have also been able to hear other major significant developments coming from around the world, as we were able to hear that the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, actually invited the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, to a peace talk that was going to be held in Moscow. This was quickly rejected and denied, and the Swiss in turn have now proposed that the meeting could be held inside of Switzerland, as they will be providing Putin, who currently has an arrest warrant under the International Criminal Court, immunity to be able to arrive in Switzerland and continue peace talks between Zelensky and Putin there, although an official date has not been designated. We have also been able to hear inside of Belgium, generally through the NATO HQ, that 10 nations inside of the Western European region, or largely a part of the NATO alliance, have proposed sending peacekeeping forces into Ukraine post-conflict, if the post-conflict era ever arrives. The Russian Federation, in the meantime, is still undergoing significant fuel shortages, with a large fuel train being attacked near to the area of Tokmak, and at the exact same time, we have also been able to hear that not only is 95 grade gas now unavailable inside of the occupied territories of Ukraine, but the fuel shortage has now extended, with 92 grade fuel now also being unavailable effective today because of the significant fuel shortages, which appear to be spiraling rapidly out of control and will most likely start to envelop regions of the Russian Federation at large as well here within the coming weeks.
Jeez. I guess you could say Russia's the only country in the world that's all brakes and no gas at this point. Also, Iran, their buddy, is pretty much the same way at this point, all brakes.
Man, I gotta be honest with you. I think it's no brakes and no gas for the Russians. But we'll have to see, especially with the Zapad 2025 exercises coming up. I don't even think they have brakes anymore. I don't think they even have OSHA acquired brakes, like the 30-minute breaks that you're supposed to have in a normal 8-hour shift. Although that can vary from state to state. But nevertheless, we have a massive amount of news to cover tonight over the past 48 hours, and we also have a couple of things to cover from yesterday, which we were not able to cover in yesterday's stream. But moving on into all of the major news that we have, because we have an insanely large amount of it tonight, we have been able to hear, moving into the Ukrainian front lines directly, that the Ukrainian armed forces have landed one of the largest strategic and tactical victories seen so far in the war in Ukraine during this year. This is not even an exaggeration by any measure. This actually is one of the largest strategic and tactical victories seen by either's armed forces over the course of the entirety of 2025, and that is the liberation of the Zoloti Kolodyaz Pocket. Once again, to remind you all, there are two existent pockets that had existed because of the Russian Federation's attempted offensive north of the area of Mirnohrad and Pokrovsk and towards the area of the town of Dobropilya, which is a significant town that is a part of the Donbass defense belt, which is a defensive fortification that the Ukrainians built well behind the current front lines to serve as the Ukrainian version of the Surovikin line, which the Russians have in Zaporizhia, in case of the Russian grueling offensives are able to slowly start moving their way towards the area of the frontier of the Donetsk Oblast. We were able to see that 2 pockets existed within this area, one at Kucheriv Yar and one at Zoloti Kolodyaz. As of today, Ukrainian armed forces did officially publish video evidence from the center of the town of Zoloti Kolodyaz, confirming that the 1st National Guard Corps of Ukraine was able to successfully liberate the town and has pushed the remnants of that battalion of the 132nd Motorized Rifle Brigade into the town of Kucheriv Yar. We actually were able to get video and picture evidence from the 79th Air Assault Brigade, which was the unit responsible for the retaking of the area of Zoloti Kolodyaz, which I'll be showing you all in this clip right here. The intro goes hard. We'll also be
that music might be copyrighted, by the way.
Yeah, we'll have to be muting the audio, but we can see Ukrainian forces on drone footage moving through the town, and we can also see them posing in front of the sign at the beginning of Zoloti Kolodyaz, as Ukrainian armed forces on film continue to show their liberation of the town through significant firepower. We can also see them showing on Deep State UA the progression of the Russian armed forces, and we can also see them showing the Ukrainians taking Russians prisoner around the area of the Zoloti Kolodyaz Pocket. This action was a significant undertaking by the Ukrainian armed forces, involving an entire National Guard Corps being deployed to the surrounding area, and some of the Ukraine's most famous units, including this one, the 79th Air Assault Brigade, being present and a part of the 1st National Guard Corps' area of responsibility and their counteroffensives to retake the towns that the Russian Federation was able to take, and not only that, the encirclement that has since then commenced, which has trapped an entire Russian battalion tactical group in Zoloti Kolodyaz, and also in the area of Kucheriv Yar. We also were able to hear that at the same time, while the 79th Air Assault Brigade was able to push the Russians out of Zoloti Kolodyaz, which is a tongue twister, the remnants, or the survivors of that assault, apparently retreated from Zoloti Kolodyaz and back towards Kucheriv Yar. At this moment, the Russians have not been able to conduct a significant offensive or breakthrough to be able to try and relieve the forces at Kucheriv Yar, with a large amount of the 1st National Guard Corps' fighting abilities actually being faced southwards towards the other Russian lines that the 132nd Motorized Rifle Brigade currently controls, to ensure that a breakthrough cannot happen to relieve what can only be described as the Lost Battalion, now at Kucheriv Yar. At this moment, from what we understand, the remnants of this battalion are now trying to make their last stand at Kucheriv Yar, now seeing that a breakout is entirely impossible, and the unit is quickly losing forces and manpower due to significant overwhelming firepower posed by the 1st National Guard Corps. We have been able to hear that now that the remnants of the battalion have been put in Kucheriv Yar and are attempting to hold out as long as they can until they're either completely destroyed or the remnants are forced to surrender, that they have now been dealt a deadly blow, at least as far as Ukrainian forces and their command responsibilities have been charged with. We have been able to hear that the famous Fighting 93rd, responsible for the largest counteroffensive seen in the war, the Kharkiv counteroffensive, which retook this entire area in green, also involved at the Battle of Bakhmut and other significant battles throughout the entirety of the conflict, has actually been moved into the area, separate from the command of the 1st National Guard Corps, and has now been put under the total command of the Ukrainian 1st National Guard Corps. They have been charged with the responsibility of conducting an offensive into the town of Kucheriv Yar to destroy the remnants of the Lost Battalion and to force the remainder of the Russian forces that are able to survive the counteroffensive as prisoners. We were actually able to see some limited footage of that today from the area around the town, showing the 93rd engaging and destroying Russian forces around the Kucheriv Yar pocket, which we can see in this clip right here. And we'll be having to mute that because, of course, copyrighted audio is something fairly normally seen in these clips. But we can see one of the main battle tanks of the 93rd Brigade advancing towards the town as a doggo wanders around behind the main battle tank.
Don't underestimate that dog right there. That's a tough dog right there. I bet he can take on a few people at once.
Man, honestly, I wouldn't doubt it. That dog's got to be rough and tough to be out here in the middle of this battlefield. But we can see the Ukrainian tank continuing to advance, and the cameraman is actually an infantryman advancing behind the tank under the cover of its heavy fire as they continue to move into the town to try and conduct most likely what can be described as a raid. At this moment, considering that this is a singular tank and most likely Ukrainian infantry platoon, we would expect that they're not trying to go into the town and create a significant foothold, but are more so attempting to advance onto the battalion's positions, inflict heavy losses, and then retreat and then reorganize for another attack into the town to continue to whittle away at Russian armed forces while ensuring that they are not under their exact range of fire to be able to take any losses themselves. The infantry continue to meticulously advance down the street under the cover of the tank, laying down fire into the open windows of the village houses that have largely already been destroyed in the prior fighting to largely push the Russians into the area of Kucheriv Yar and Zoloti Kolodyaz. And we can see this infantry squad, at least on film, continuing to move from house to house down the street behind the main battle tank, which appears to advance nearly a quarter mile down the road at that point. We also were able to see that these infantry have been supported by rocket artillery, with the forces, once again, of the 93rd Brigade providing fire support with their BM-21 grads into the town to soften up and suppress Russian forces, and to also ensure that their morale continues to drop, as the chances of them breaking out is becoming incredibly slim, and the chances of the Russians being able to relieve the lost battalion is also next to none. The BM-21 grads of the 93rd continue to lay down insanely large amounts of firepower, at least from what we've been able to hear from the forces of the 93rd, to inflict as many casualties as possible before the Ukrainians conduct direct assaults, and to also try and lower their morale and encourage the Russian forces to surrender, which we can see in this clip right here. And we'll be having to mute that as well. The Ukrainians love their copyrighted music.
Also, by the way, the Azov is still in this area, right? Because I know the Azov responded to this initial incursion by Russia, and also obviously the 93rd did as well. So is Azov still here, or have they left pretty much?
Technically, the 1st National Guard Corps is the Azov. So from what we would generally understand, they are still in the area.
Interesting. Ukraine really brought in a ton of reinforcements, which was the right thing to do, obviously, because a lot of people would criticize Ukraine, saying that maybe this area was left pretty much undefended for the most part. I even saw some Ukrainian commanders, or at least one of them, posting on Telegram at one point that the area was largely undefended and that maybe Zelensky was not getting proper reports. So Ukraine brought in like the heavy firepower. Once they realized this area was having some trouble, they were able to bring in reinforcements super fast, which was honestly kind of surprising because many people, as y'all recall, were very, very worried that this area was going to collapse as a whole. But it turns out that Ukraine still has tons of reserves they can just bring in at any moment and basically patch the entire situation very quick, like we've seen.
The availability of strategic reserves was something that was actually somewhat questionable, at least at the onset of the battle, as we did not know how many Ukrainian forces are technically within the strategic reserve. Due to operational security reasons, the Ukrainian armed forces do not publicize the exact movements of brigades or entire corps level units as a part of operational security, to ensure that the Russian Federation also does not have an understanding of how many reserve forces are available at any given moment to be able to plug a gap or a breakthrough that the Russian Federation has conducted. For that reason, it was not only a surprise to everyone here in the West, but also a surprise to the Russian Federation that the dismounted foot infantry advance of this singular battalion of the 132nd was met in response by an entire corps level unit that deployed immediately into the area. And not only that, the 93rd Brigade, from what we understand, is not even a structural part of the 1st National Guard Corps of Ukraine. And I want to make sure that my research is correct, and I'll make sure to pull this up for all of y'all here on air. The 1st National Guard Corps of Ukraine, and let me go and get the one in Ukraine, not the 1st National Guard Corps of the United States. This is the emblem of the Ukrainian 1st Corps of the Ukrainian National Guard, which is technically the Azov. The Azov does comprise of the 1st Corps of the Ukrainian National Guard, Azov, the Corps Headquarters, Management and Command or Commandant Platoon, which is generally the administrative level and command level of the entire Corps, but most importantly, the actual fighting elements are found within the brigades. The 1st Brigade, 12th Brigade, 14th Brigade, 15th Brigade, and 20th Brigade are all a part of the 1st National Guard Corps of Ukraine, or specifically the Azov. Most importantly, the one that carries the Azov name into battle at a brigade level is the 12th Special Purpose Brigade, the Azov. The 1st National Guard Corps is technically called Azov, but the Brigade Azov is only the 12th. The 1st Presidential Operation Brigade is named the Buryev. The 14th is called the Chernova Kalina. The 15th is called the Karada, and also the 20th is called the Lyubard. Many people have actually heard of the Chernova Kalina and Karada brigades throughout the entirety of the conflict, along with the Buryev or the Presidential Operation Brigade. Many people have heard a lot about the 12th Special Purpose Brigade, which has been generally considered to be the Azov. The 12th was present at the Battle of Mariupol and the siege of the Azovstal inside of the city of Mariupol. They have also been present at the Battle of the Severonsky Forest. They were also present in the Kupiansk counteroffensive, or generally as we call it here on the channel, the Kharkiv 2022 counteroffensive. And they've also been present at this current battle, the Mirnohrad breakthrough. The 12th Special Purpose Brigade is probably one of the highest level units in terms of battle honors or significant offensives that they've been involved in, next to the 93rd, which generally has the highest level of battle honors that we have been able to assess here on the channel as part of being involved in successful counteroffensives or victories by the Ukrainian armed forces. But generally, one thing that is incredibly interesting is that the 93rd Brigade of Ukraine is not actually a part of the 1st National Guard Corps, suggesting that it was specifically moved from the Strategic Reserve or from an active area of the front, as we generally understand that the 93rd had been fighting around the Pokrovsk area for some time under the command of the 1st National Guard Corps, which generally is control of the Mirnohrad breakthrough sector, and has now been charged with the responsibility of the counteroffensive. From what we can tell, really quickly, I want to see what corps this is attached to. This is actually attached to the 21st Army Corps, a completely separate command than the 1st National Guard Corps, meaning that the 93rd was specifically brought in to deal with the Kucheriv Yar Pocket, which is an incredibly interesting thing to note, and once again showing that even Ukrainian command considers to be the 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade to be one of their most battle-hardened or at least well-trained units involved in the front around that area. So quite an interesting thing to see, and once again showing us that the armed forces of Ukraine are still able to pull their weight, at least in this particular situation. A lot of people have been talking about the Ukrainians retaking the town of Zoloti Kolodyaz and relegating the Russian Federation to its remaining pocket at Kucheriv Yar, where the Lost Battalion will most likely make its final stand, and a lot of people are wondering what kind of a battle this is going to be, or generally, as a larger part, what the entire Pokrovsk campaign is going to end up becoming as a result of this blistering defeat by the Russian Federation at the Kucheriv Yar Pocket. And Matthew, what are people thinking of this, and what are you thinking of it as well?
All right, so surprisingly, the polls almost evenly split between two major options. It looks like 43% of the audience said Ukraine will have an uphill battle, while 37% said Ukraine will take it all very quickly, and 14% said it seems too early to tell right now. Now, one thing like we were just talking about, the Ukrainians brought in reinforcements to this area very, very quickly, much to the surprise of many war observers, including myself, I would say. I would say that was a much quicker, rapid response of reinforcements than I was even expecting. So the Azov showed up, the 92nd showed up, 93rd, excuse me, and several others showed up as well. So I would say that the Russian Pokrovsk finger, as many people are calling this advance through Pokrovsk that the Russians conducted, it's going to get encircled. The Russians are already being taken prisoner, and it's already a failure for the Russians. So clearly that meat grinder strategy did not work too well in that advance, and now Russia's paying a very high price. But the catch is, though, all Ukraine's going to be able to do is cut off that advance. They're not going to be able to push into the areas which Russia is occupying. That's going to probably be too big of an ask. So they will encircle the Russians, they'll take them prisoner, they'll push the advance away and back into the Russian occupation area, but that'll pretty much be the end of it. So I think that's what we're going to be seeing here. So I'm going to say Ukraine will pretty much take that advance area pretty quick. It's going to be a pretty quick process, and we're already seeing them knock out a huge portion of it right now. Some with the 37%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say that the armed forces of Ukraine will have an uphill battle retaking the entirety of the Pokrovsk battlefield. But as far as Russian breakthroughs or lightning offensives are concerned, the Russian Federation has no ability to be able to conduct these offensives without overextending their forces and suffering significant losses, including the loss, in literal theoretical sense, of an entire battalion, which is currently lost effectively at the moment. The Russian Federation has been conducting a slow and grueling offensive for the latter part of a year and a half from Avdiivka towards the town of Pokrovsk, and of course have met heavy resistance once again around the city of Pokrovsk itself. The Russian Federation has made quite literally near to no advances when we speak on a larger scale in terms of the amount of losses that have been taken, in terms of the amount of brigades currently present in the battle, and also the amount of losses that they've taken in vehicles, equipment, and personnel as a result of this offensive. If we look back over the past month, just to show y'all what this looked like an entire month ago, this is how far the Russians have made it around Pokrovsk a month ago. Moving all the way up into the present day, we can see that the Russians have made minuscule advances in most areas, But hardly the front line has changed. At best, they've most likely moved about 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers in most directions and fronts, but the Pokrovsk front itself around the city has pretty much been completely stagnant, and Russian attempts to advance into the area of Perche-Trevina, which is the only area we've seen the Russian Federation forces were able to break through into the city for a momentary period, were completely repelled with significant losses, once again pushing them back towards the town of Shevchenko. The fact that the Russian Federation's attempted breakthrough around the area of Kucheriv Yar was conducted with a dismounted foot infantry battalion, and not only that, with a complete lack of artillery support of any type, is generally showing us that Russian Federation armed forces abilities are completely stretched out to their maximum at this point to gain about 1 kilometer of ground around the surrounding flanks of the city of Pokrovsk over the period of an entire month. That also is showing us that the Russian Federation, in terms of available resources or strategic reserves of manpower or supplies, is also completely stretched as well, once again. The fact that this battalion was not supported by artillery is something that's incredibly telling. It's telling us that the majority of Russian artillery shells being diverted to this front to be used by this offensive is being fired into Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad, and not be available to be used or stockpiled for future offensive attempts like the ones that we saw around the area of Zoloti Kolodyaz. This gives us the clearest picture that Russian offensive abilities in this area are stretched entirely thin. However, at the same time, Ukrainian defensive efforts are also stretched incredibly thin as well. The Ukrainians are able to hold a defensive line, but in terms of conducting a lightning counteroffensive in response to the Russians, outside of a battalion level element will most likely be difficult. We have seen that the Ukrainians conducted limited counteroffensives in the day to be able to push the Russians back towards Novotroitsky and also behind Shevchenko to the south, but we have never seen any further Ukrainian counteroffensive efforts in this area that have resulted in significant losses of ground by the Russian Federation. For that reason, we generally would believe that while the Ukrainians are able to stop and destroy any attempted Russian breakthroughs due to the Russians' lack of an ability to divert a proper amount of resources and manpower to those offensives, the Ukrainians will also not be able to conduct any sort of successful counteroffensives that will be able to completely wipe out the Russian attacking force at Pokrovsk, and this generally means that the front line will once again stabilize, and the Russians will be in their grueling, incredibly high loss offensive once again, and the Ukrainians will be in their pretty relatively comfortable position of conducting a long-lasting defense while taking minimal losses and inflicting incredibly high losses onto the Russian Federation's armed forces, which resource-wise is incredibly exhaustive. But while it's been...
You would think at this point that Vladimir Putin would look at the situation and realize that he can make no progress at all breaking through Ukraine's defensive lines. You would think that either he would want to negotiate properly and actually in good faith and not just, negotiate for the sake of it, but actually try to end the war. Or you would think that something would change, because what is Putin's plan at this point? Just to keep on going endlessly year after year, not really gaining ground of notable, I guess you could say notable substance at all, and throwing so many tens of thousands of men into the meat grinder. There's no real strategy here at all. And Putin keeps recycling these generals. He keeps getting new generals all the time, purging old ones and getting new ones. And they all bring the same strategy. It's just throw more men at the problem and see if it sticks.
Generally, the Russians do have a strategy. It's just that it's such a slow-moving one that it doesn't really look like on any given day there is a strategy. If you look at the current Russian front lines as they existed right now, it's pretty clear that they do have a running strategy, at least at the moment. They are attempting to conduct an encirclement of Pokrovsk and Konstantinivka. It's just that it takes about an entire year and a half to even see these attempted encirclements to even reach anything that could be described as a partial encirclement. Even still, this is not even close to being an encirclement, either on Pokrovsk or Konstantinivka, because we understand that the supply lines are still fully operational and haven't even been impaired in their supply abilities. That generally means that this isn't even considered, by classification, a partial encirclement. It is more so an attempted encirclement at the moment, but still not even making it to the level of a partial encirclement. It's taken the Russians about an entire year and a half to get to this point on Konstantinivka and Pokrovsk, and it's also taken them about the loss of 50 to 60,000 men in both offensives combined to even be able to make it to this point, meaning that a partial encirclement will most likely take about an additional 60,000 losses at this given rate in about another year and a half to be able to even try and encircle Pokrovsk or Konstantinivka. Not only that, but the Russians are also taking significant losses near to the area of the town of Seversk and also the Sabronsky Forest, which are another prong of an offensive that is attempting to encircle the major cities of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. Even then, the Russian Federation over 2 years years has not been able to break out of the Severonsky Forest due to the well-fortified Ukrainian positions in that area and the heavy fighting posed by the International Legion and the 12th Special Purpose Azov Brigade. And we've also been able to see that the Ukrainian forces, including the 56th Brigade and 54th Brigade at Seversk, have been able to hold and stop any Russian offenses by the 6th separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade within the area of Seversk. Generally,
well, you see, that's the theme. That's the theme along the entire front line is what you're talking about. The Ukrainians have enough guys in place and enough strong defensive lines to hold back the Russians at their current lines. The Russians, for them to gain even an inch of ground, they have to like 1,000 or 10,000 guys have to get eliminated for them to take an inch. So it makes you wonder, since Putin is not negotiating, in my opinion, it seems like Putin is pretty much checking out of the negotiations. It's not really getting anywhere, at least from what I'm seeing right now on the news. So it makes you wonder, is he going to do something crazy, like, for example, during Zapad, try to invade Ukraine from the north, or is he going to do something even crazier than that to try to break the stalemate? Because if he's not talking, then he's got to do something to break the stalemate, because he can't go for like 4 more years and lose 2 million more men to take just like an extra mile. That doesn't make any sense. So he has to do something to break it. My question is, what is he going to do to break it?
Well, there is something that's a little bit important to mention, especially about Russian attempted peace negotiations or attempted Russian peace demands at the moment, which is the fact that the Russian Federation, and I want to lay this out to all of y'all again, demanded that they get the remainder of the Donetsk Oblast, in particular, forgetting everything else, to be able to get into a ceasefire. Now, this is an interesting one as far as the strategic implications of the war are concerned. And let's go down the hypothetical for a moment that the Ukrainians would relent and give up that territory. The largest defensive line that the Ukrainians have built is in this area. It's called the Dobropilskaya defense line, which is actually based around the town of Dobropilia, and it exists around the surrounding hillsides and all the way up towards the areas of the outskirts to the east of Kramatorsk and Slovyansk, with the defensive line advancing all the way to the Severetsky Donets River. From what we generally understand, this is such a heavily fortified defensive line that it is as fortified or even further fortified than the Russian Surovikin line that exists around the towns of Robotine and also Verbove in particular, but expands across the entirety of the southern front line in Zaporizhia. This defensive line is so well fortified, it may as well be described as Ukraine's Maginot Line. And to quickly explain to all of y'all, while the Maginot Line is generally considered to be a historical failure at national defense, the reason why it was a national failure, or generally a major strategic failure, is because the French built their defensive lines through the area of the Alsace-Lorraine area, or province. It was generally planned that this defensive line would actually expand all the way through Belgium as well, meaning that the Maginot Line was supposed to extend all the way through Alsace-Lorraine, around the Luxembourg border area, and then through Belgium as well. The reason why the Maginot Line generally failed, although it stood up incredibly well in combat, with the German forces quite literally unable to break through during the earlier offensives of 1940, the Germans were simply able to march through the undefended lands of Belgium, where no defensive line existed, and quite literally just bypass the Maginot Line, ensuring that they did not have to continue to try and punch through a defensive line that, quite truly, in real form, was completely impregnable and impenetrable by enemy forces. This is something that is somewhat similar, at least in Ukraine. The problem is, though, there is no Belgium inside of Donetsk. They're going to hit the Ukrainian Maginot Line, and there is quite literally no way to get around the line, meaning that the Ukrainians would be able to hold the remainder of the Donetsk Oblast, including the key cities of Slovyansk and Kramatorsk, throughout the remainder of the war. The Russian demand for the Ukrainians to give up Donetsk would quite literally allow them to diplomatically bypass the Battle of the Maginot Line that would exist in Donetsk and set their offensives literally across the defensive line. So that means that once that ceasefire possibly was initiated at that point, after they gave up that ground without a fight, the Ukrainian defensives beyond there practically do not exist, at least for right now. So even if the Ukrainians did see that the Russians accepted a 1-month ceasefire after the cessation of that land, the offensive would begin again, and no defensive positions to the degree of the Dobropilskaya defensive line would exist beyond that point, meaning that the ground would be open for the Russians to start conducting possibly even rapid advances through the open countryside to threaten the cities of Dnipro, Pavlograd, Lazova, and Balaklia, as well as Pervomaiske within the Kharkiv Oblast region. Russians. Generally, that's the reason why Putin is not shooting for a peace treaty. He was shooting for a ceasefire, was so that way he could be able to bypass his armed forces past the Dobropilsk line and directly into the open fields of the Dnipropetrovsk and Kharkiv oblasts. But it does appear that the Russians are running into some fairly significant issues in their offensives around the area of the Pokrovsk and Konstantinivka fronts, and it also does appear that as a result of that, the Russians might be getting a little desperate. In fact, incredibly desperate. Things are not looking that well for the Russian Federation, even on the strategic level of supply, especially in terms of critical fuel products throughout the entirety of Ukraine. And a lot of people have been talking, before I even get into the critical loss of fuel products and the crippling fuel shortages that they're also going through, about the possibility of the Russians conducting something incredibly rash here by the beginning of the next month. And a lot of people are wondering what Putin might do to try and break the stalemate that currently exists in the Donetsk front in Ukraine. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So it looks like on the poll here, about 46% said Russia's going to invade Ukraine from the Belarus direction, while 45% said the status quo fighting will continue on the Russian side, and 5% said Putin will agree to a ceasefire to break the stalemate. Now, Putin, in my opinion, has to do something. He cannot continue status quo fighting, because if he does that, Russia is definitely going to be basically experiencing a very slow death through low recruitment numbers, economic death, and also probably the death of the Putin regime as well, because I'm sure it's not going to hold up for 4 more years while Putin tries to take more ground inside of Ukraine. So I really don't see status quo fighting being the answer here. Typically what Putin does when he's backed into a corner is he likes to up the stakes. And usually he ups the stakes to his own detriment, as we found throughout the entirety of the Ukraine war. So I would say that while everybody's been talking about Zapad 2025 perhaps being the smokescreen for maybe an attack on a NATO country, it could have a dual use here. It could be maybe that's still a threat, of course, to NATO, but it could be a secondary threat to maybe Ukraine being invaded from the north, because Putin has to do something. And right now with Zapad being put into place and 100,000 men being moved into Belarus, that could be the start of something from the north that ends up taking Ukraine by surprise. So I would say I'm with the 46%. I think Putin's at least considering an invasion from the Belarus direction. But whether or not that turns out to be the case, that's not certain. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that at least at the moment, I do think that the Russian Federation is going to be conducting status quo fighting. I would have to go with the 44%, because the Zapad 2025 military exercises, by all accounts, according to satellite photography, as well as Russian publications at the moment, appear to be showing that force buildups are already occurring at the regimental level, and most likely soon to reach the corps level, around the area of the city of Grodno, within northwestern Belarus. It is incredibly difficult, especially for the Russian Federation, considering that their military logistics and supply chain are based off of the railroads, to be able to conduct significant force relocations to the area around the city of Brest in the southwestern region of the country of Belarus, to be able to open up a new offensive either towards the city of Lviv, or to rapidly relocate Russian forces several hundred miles across the country from the city of Grodno to the city of Gomel, which is about 310 miles, to base them for another attempted offensive on the northern axis near to Chernihiv and Kyiv. That sort of a development would be fairly difficult to pull off, as Russian offensive buildups usually take around 2 to 3 months to completely coalesce, and are something that's easily followable by satellite pictures and also additional intelligence and data that can be provided. For that reason, considering the lack of Russian flexibility in logistical deployments, I would have to consider that the Zapad 2025 military exercise will most likely continue around the area of the city of Grodno as a signature threat to the West that's been conducted for years now, that the Russian Federation can amass and conduct an ability to take the Zoloti Gap and largely open a greater conflict with NATO. Whether or not that's going to be a conventional offensive or not in its truest form outside of a war game is yet to be seen, although the European Union and multiple NATO states, including the United States of America, have floated the consideration that this may be a prelude to an attempted invasion of the most vital choke point that exists within the NATO alliance at the moment, which exists around the Zoloti Gap. Outside of that, the Russian Federation really has no further offensive abilities or any way to break through the Ukrainian lines and advance any farther to try and break the stalemate inside of Donetsk. Even still, with the fact that the 1st National Guard Corps was available as a strategic reserve, although multiple Russian sources and Russian propagandists were saying that the Ukrainian armed forces were quite truly stretched to their absolute limit in terms of available manpower involved in the fighting on the front, that generally shows us that the Ukrainians may also still have a large enough strategic reserve to counter any attempted Russian offensive from the Belarusian direction, either towards the area of Lviv or towards the area of Kyiv and Chernihiv as well. So I generally would have to go with a 44% for that matter. I don't really think the Russian Federation has an ability at the moment to be able to break the stalemate within the Donetsk front. But with that,
I've got an idea. How about Zelensky just goes and travels to Moscow by himself and goes and meets with Putin to discuss the end of the war? That seems like it could be the best way forward.
that would probably be the greatest way forward. We did get to hear that the Russians already did invite Zelensky to Moscow, which is always known as a neutral third-party location between two belligerent parties that are currently at war. And, of course, Zelensky refused that outright. That wasn't even really considered by the Ukrainians, nor was it really considered by anybody. That was a terrible idea because, to put this out there, once again for people to know, it is okay, at least in theory, for Zelensky to come to the United States, or even Putin to come to the United States, because the United States is not a direct belligerent in the conflict involved in the ground fighting. It is absolutely unacceptable, to make this clear, for the Ukrainians to invite Putin to Kyiv, or for the Russians to invite Zelensky to Moscow. It's absolutely out of the question. Those are the two warring parties, and for that reason, if any talks are to be held between the two of them, they are to be held in a neutral third-party country. Generally, in the past, Turkey was a primary candidate for that, or everyone can use the historical option, at least in the last century and this century, of Switzerland, which is also always considered to be a neutral third-party ground that both sides can talk on and know that the country that the meeting is being held in is absolutely neutral as far as everyone is concerned. However, while the Russian Federation did try and pull a little sneaky on Zelensky today, we did get to hear that there was also a little sneaky being pulled on the Russians inside of the Zaporizhia region. As many of y'all will know, fuel shortages are starting to become a larger issue in the Russian Federation. The Ukrainians, just last night in a major drone attack, attacked the Volgograd oil refinery again. And from what we understand, 22% of all Russian oil refining abilities have been completely knocked out at this moment throughout the Russian Federation, and the Russian Federation is bleeding hundreds of thousands of barrels of fuel per day in a shortage that they are not able to fix at the moment. They are not able to import the fuel products that they would need due to the exorbitant cost, and the Russian Federation's refineries are no longer able to keep up with the strain, meaning that they're spiraling rapidly out of control. Fuel is becoming incredibly limited, meaning that fuel is a prime target in any form for the Ukrainians to hit and destroy anywhere inside the country. And that brings us to another Achilles heel that we were just speaking about a moment ago when talking about the Russians potentially starting a new offensive in Belarus. And that is the fact that Russians logistically primarily run on the railroads. Unlike most every other country in the world, where it's generally a 50-50 split between trucking taking up around 50% of the overland transit, with railroads taking up the other percent, the Russian Federation more so exists in a 70-30. With 70% of the nation's logistics and supplies being moved by rail, with the remaining 30% being moved by truck. That is even more so important in the Russian Federation, where 100% of all major logistical goods and supplies are transported by rail long distance, in any distances considered over 100 miles, with the remainder 100 miles of transit being conducted by truck. This is something that is incredibly important because the Russian Federation, even in occupied Ukraine, still relies heavily on the railroads to be able to move their significant amounts of supplies and resources, not just to the army, but also to the occupied territories, to keep them at some sort of a functional level of economic activity to ensure that these occupied territories don't completely collapse. One of these areas is Tokmak, and Tokmak is a significant supply distribution point for the Russian Federation, or as it's called in a strategic logistical sense, a railhead. The Tokmak rail yard is generally filled all the time with vital rail goods that are being transported in and out of the country. Through this small rail yard, seen right here, and also the surrounding spurs, they are able to load up fuel supplies, tanks, and any other equipment needed for the Zaporizhia and Kherson areas, and then distribute them to their forces around the area. Recently, the Russians actually had a major fuel train traveling from this eastern area of the city, generally south of the city, but from the eastern main line, heading from the area of the city of Chernihivka over to the area of Tokmak. The Ukrainians actually were able to coordinate and conduct, based over the schedules of these trains, a drone attack on this train and have been able to completely destroy most of the fuel reserves that were being carried by the singular train into the city of Tokmak to be distributed to the occupied territories and also to the Russian armed forces as well. This is the singular largest loss of fuel that we have seen in about the entirety of the year of actual usable fuel products that could be used by the Russian armed forces. And I'll be bringing y'all through the clips and the evidence that we have of the damage caused in this attack and the aftermath. First off, the Ronin unit, which is connected, I believe, technically to the 65th Separate Mechanized Brigade, was responsible for the drone attack and the coordination of the drone attack that was conducted on this fuel train. You can already see in the clip that part of the fuel train is on fire and has taken direct impacts by Ukrainian drones, as the remainder of the Ronin's drones continue to fly in, targeting and destroying key fuel tanks throughout the entirety of the train.
Well, why'd the train stop if they knew they were getting struck? Why didn't they just try to keep dragging along and hope that maybe they would miss?
The first attack by the first drone most likely hit the fuel tank, and the burning fire actually burned away at the rubber air hoses that exist between the rail cars that provide a brake reservoir, meaning that once that line was severed, the back of the train's brakes lost all of their air pressure, meaning that the brakes automatically applied pretty much an emergency brake, and the train came to a rolling stop simply because it could no longer run because half of the train's brakes were applied at that point, which made the attack a lot easier, at least for the Ukrainians' perspective.
Yeah, I would say that's also very bad for them, is they couldn't keep dragging it along. But this right here is what I was saying. All brakes, no gas. This is pretty much it right here. Also, I'm kind of surprised that these drones right here, I guess that goes to show how much explosive force these drones truly have behind them. They're able to puncture through that steel that's consisting of these train cars right here pretty easily and actually get to the fuel and ignite it. So that's pretty interesting to see the thickness of the steel and how the drone's able to just penetrate right through it.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, and the explosions, of course, were extremely violent, and the fuel, of course, burns wildly hot. And that's something that I do want to put out again to everyone. There was nothing that the Russian railroad crew could do, that was actually a good question by Matthew, to move the train once it got hit the first time. Because, and I'll try and show this to y'all really quickly, at least how it works on American railroads, but it works the same way everywhere around the world, is that pretty much every single bit of the Russian railroads, American railroads, everyone's railroads in the world work off of an air brake system called the Westinghouse air brake. And let me go see if I can show y'all the train brake hoses to show y'all how this works, at least in theory, to explain why the train came to a complete stop. So, this is what the connection between a locomotive and a rail car would generally look like. You can also see some auxiliary cables here that are connected to provide other sorts of systems to the rest of the rail cars, but most importantly, it's this little piece right here that matters. This is rubber. And it's very thick rubber at that. It's kind of like a rubber sort of I guess you could say a hybrid or a composite of a sort, but it can generally hold, the standard around the world, is something around 90 psi worth of air pressure inside of this brake pipe. This little thing on the end is called a glad hand, and using the two of them, one on one rail car and one on the other, you clasp them together, and throughout the entire length of the train, you have a continuously connected brake system, meaning that when the main locomotive applies its brakes, it's actually augmenting the air pressure throughout the entirety of the train, which in turn applies the brakes on every single rail car. You can actually see one of those brakes. Actually, it's obscured on this rail car. Let me see if I can show you all a brake shoe on a rail car, because those are a little bit important. You can actually kind of see it right about there, but it's a brake shoe. It's made of iron. It applies to the steel wheel, and it starts to slow the train down. If you ever go near to a railroad at a high grade, if you want to call it that, and you see a train coming downhill, you'll actually smell this somewhat kind of semi-burning smell, and that's actually coming from the iron on the brakes heating up as it's going downhill due to the heat from the friction. But getting back to the explanation of how this works, this is rubber. So if an oil car is hit and it catches on fire, and the fuel or some sort of fire directly starts to lap up against this rubber brake pipe, it starts to melt it. And once it's melted enough, that extreme air pressure that's held within the brake pipe will immediately spew out, meaning that all of the remaining rail cars that are not attached directly to the locomotive, their air pressure in the brakes goes down to zero, and the brake shoes apply completely, meaning that those rail cars are completely stuck in place and they cannot be moved. That also means that the locomotive itself, if they're not able to uncouple it in time, also cannot move either, meaning that the train literally becomes fixed in place once that first attack happens, meaning that it's pretty much a sitting duck at that point for the remaining number of drones that the 65th had available to come in and attack and destroy the train. We also were able to see the train continuing to burn after the attack was generally complete, and of course we can see that most of the fuel tanks were absolutely destroyed. Also,
That's
some
interesting.
people...
I've never really gotten to see all their stuff on the table up there. They got like a bottle of something over there. I couldn't tell what that was. It looked like an energy drink or something, but I couldn't tell.
Man, they got that Red Bull out here. They got to keep it energized because Red Bull gives them wings, so that way they can give the Russians some too. It's all about sharing.
This is like a hobbyist dream too. There's like all kinds of like huge like battery packs over there. They have like a lighter. I tell you what, this thing right here is like a hobbyist hangout.
It really is. It's actually pretty wild. We also got to see a little bit of the fuel train once again getting hit to show you a little bit more footage of it. Here's a more high-definition picture. And we could see from pretty much the head end of the locomotive to the trailing end, it's on fire the entire length. We also got to see another satellite picture as well, showing us the fuel train at its full length. And what's even more interesting, this is something that's actually a little bit shocking here, the rear of the train violently derailed at some point because we can see the fuel cars were actually scattered around on the ground, which also would have severed the brake lines as well if the fire and the rupture of a brake hose did not cause the train to break. The rapid derailment of the train also would have forced it to break. Most trains in the Russian Federation and also throughout Europe actually have something called, I believe it's called an active train control, an ATC or a PTC, which used to be existent in America, and I believe it's being replaced by an active train control. That means if it ever detects that the train loses any of its rail cars, it automatically applies the emergency brakes, and it comes to a complete stop. There's generally no way to override that system, at least from what I know, but that generally would also explain why the train came to a rapid stop, and of course, then was ambushed pretty much by the 65th. But still, a massive attack. And also, by the way, while we're talking about that massive attack and the significant loss of fuel that was seen just in that single train alone, now throughout the entirety of the occupied areas, not only is 95 grade fuel no longer unavailable, but is now extended to 92 grade fuel. Now the only types of fuel available are DT, which is diesel fuel, and that's it. So
that's kind of interesting because, in America, usually it's like, I think it's like 87, 89, and like 93. I think that's the three primary grades that we have in America at most gas stations. Russia goes all the way up to 95 octane, which to my understanding is usually reserved for more high performance engines. So, most Russians don't have like sports cars. They're driving like Ladas with very small displacement engines. So it's like, why do they have 95 octane? It's like, they're not running like top fuel dragsters or something in Russia.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing, and also if you notice, there is no other variants of fuel rather than 95 and 92. It goes straight to diesel after that, DT, and then LPG, and that's it. Like that's all the available types of fuel products. There's not really any other normal types of gasoline available, which is a little bit odd, I'll have to say. But still, it does...
Also, by the way, many people are saying it's different octane there. Okay, that makes more sense. I was about to say, surely they don't have higher octane than we've got because they don't have cars that support that type of gas. So that explains it. Also, by the way, is that a picture of Medvedev with the booze bottle out there at the bottom right? Do you see that?
Man, blood's going through it.
Man, he's got that Finlandia. I've never even heard of that, but damn, that is like a Rembrandt right there. That is like one for the history books. I'll frame that one on the wall. I'll take it.
Honestly, this one goes hard. Feel free to screenshot, folks. Actually, you know what, folks? I rarely ever do this. I'll give like 10 seconds right here for y'all to screenshot this one and turn it into a profile picture if y'all want to, because this one goes hard. This one's pretty good. So we'll just sit here. All right, the 10 seconds is up, folks. Hopefully y'all were able to get a screenshot of it. But we'll be moving on from Medvedev going through a lot right now. I actually think he's going through a bottle right now is a better description of what he's doing. But nevertheless, it does appear that the Russians are pretty much at the absolute limit inside the occupied territories. Not only is fuel pretty much run out for the entirety of the occupied territories, but one of the critical fuel trains that would have given just a drop of fuel to at least some of the occupied areas and the Russian army was also destroyed, and generally thoroughly destroyed today, meaning that remaining fuel supply has also ceased to exist as well. But with that, a lot of people were talking about the little mention that we made about the Russian invitation for Zelensky to come to Moscow. for a one-to-one meeting between Zelensky and the Gulag. Zelensky and Putin. And Matthew, what were people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So after Putin got done talking to the U.S. president at the White House, he told the U.S. president on the phone, according to reports, that he wants Zelensky alone. He rejected the U.S. president even going to Moscow. He said, I want Zelensky to come straight to Moscow to my office, and I want him to come alone. Now, obviously, to me, that sounds like a threat. I would say it's pretty clearly a threat since Putin's tried to assassinate Zelensky in the past. That clearly sounds concerning. So what are your thoughts about that? 64% said that sounds like a clear trap, while 17% said it's simply unrealistic, but it's not a trap, and 14% said it proves that Putin is very unserious. And I would say it sounds to me, like I said, it sounds like a threat. The only reason Putin would want Zelensky to come by himself to Moscow is so that way he can arrest him, put him on trial, and also drag him through the mud and maybe assassinate him at the same time. So obviously that's something that Zelensky would never agree to. Putin would never agree to come to Kyiv either. So to say that also proves he is unserious as well. But I think what Putin was trying to do was intimidate Zelensky by telling him that. So now, obviously, if they wanted to meet, they could simply get on a Zoom call, or they could get on a voice call or a video call or something. Why does Zelensky need to go physically to Moscow to have these peace talks? And how come Putin didn't agree to go somewhere neutral to have the peace talks? So I would say, to me, it shows us all pretty much what Putin's plan is here. And Putin is stringing people along like he likes to do. So I'm with the 65%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say I'm with the 65%. That's clearly a trap. Just to say this really quickly, standard diplomatic procedure and protocol dictates that the two warring parties do not convene a peace talk in either one of their countries. They cannot go there. Like, that's just absolutely off the books. You always have to conduct a peace talk in a neutral third-party country. There is quite literally no example, except for one where it involves unconditional surrender or a complete defeat, where anyone signed a peace deal anywhere inside of one of the warring countries. Like, for example, let's go through a couple of U.S. wars to get that out there at least somewhat well. One, the Revolutionary War was ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Notice how both sides didn't go to the UK or the US to sign the treaty. Let's see, the War of 1812 would have been concluded with the Treaty of Ghent in 1815, which was signed inside of Ghent, Belgium. In case you were wondering, that's a real city. It's right here. That's where the War of 1812's treaty was signed in 1815. The Mexican-American War actually was seeded with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which was actually signed inside of Mexico, but that generally was once again largely considered to be an unconditional surrender by the Mexican Empire at that point. Later on, the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, which generally is considered the end of the U.S. Civil War, was signed inside of Confederate territory in Virginia. But once again, that was generally considered to be an unconditional surrender of Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, which generally is considered to be the end of the Civil War. Later on from that, if we talk about any other conflict, let's go with World War I. World War I was seeded with the Treaty of Versailles, which once again was an unconditional surrender by the Imperial German Army and the Imperial German government, and we weren't able to sign one with Austria-Hungary because they did this crazy thing. They collapsed and turned into pretty much what exists in the Balkans today, including former Yugoslavia. Then if we talk about World War II, the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany was signed, I believe, around the area of Potsdam, if I'm not mistaken. Although a Soviet official was not present that was a high enough rank, he arrived the next day. That's why the Russians say that World War II in Europe ended on the 9th of May, and we say that it ended on the 8th. And also the unconditional surrender of the Japanese was signed on board the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. Once again, an unconditional surrender. But notice that every war that the United States has ever fought, where it was not an unconditional surrender, they were always signed in a third-party country. There was never one where it was signed inside of one of the warring countries. That is just generally considered to be diplomatic bad faith, because you're at war with them. Who's to say, considering that you're at war with them, they wouldn't take that as the perfect time to corner you, execute you, or arrest you and then put you on trial for serious crimes and then put you in prison? It's entirely possible. That's why you always pick a third-party country. That's also why, speaking of which, on that poll, that Switzerland has already stated that they are ready to host the talks as a third-party intermediary, and that is probably one of the smartest sorts of moves that both sides could agree to. Switzerland is the most neutral country in the world. There's no joke about it. Switzerland truly is, as far as most countries are concerned, the truly most neutral country. That is because Since the Congress of Vienna in 1815, it has been delegated to the Swiss to be a neutral country. Because back when the Napoleonic Wars ended in 1815, there was this huge deal that loads of European countries didn't want to see another Napoleon or some sort of a change in the balance of power in Europe that would create another deadly conflict like the Napoleonic Wars. So their way to fix it was to create the Congress of Vienna, which was held in Vienna, Austria, in 1815, which generally started to lay out that no matter what, every European country on the continent had to be focused on the sole purpose of maintaining the balance of power in Europe to make sure that both sides were so evenly matched, if there ever was a creation of two different sides, which there eventually was. They were so evenly matched that the concept of a war breaking out would be completely unacceptable because no one would ever win. It would end up becoming a grueling stalemate at best, and it would end up being absolutely atrocious, which is what World War I turned into. So the Congress of Vienna of 1815 actually worked in the end. But outside of that, the Congress of Vienna of 1815 also outlined that as punishment on the Swiss, well, it wasn't even a confederation then. It was technically, I believe, the Helvetic Kingdoms. But as a punishment on the Helvetic Kingdoms, which generally aligned with the Revolutionary French and then later on the Imperial French under Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars, they were going to be relegated to a neutral country, and it would guarantee that the balance of power in Europe was maintained. Since then, nobody's changed that. And not only that, the Swiss, after the Civil War of 1848, which is called the Sonderbund, generally decided that this was a great idea to just remain militantly neutral. And since then, they've never changed that. Recently, in the war in Ukraine, there were some people in Switzerland who wanted to change it, but the decision was made that they wouldn't, and they still remain inherently neutral. It's generally a cultural keystone or cornerstone of Switzerland to this day, meaning that if anyone has a problem in the world, the best place to meet is Switzerland. You can guarantee that they don't have a bone to pick with either warring party. As a matter of fact, they didn't have a bone to pick with the Nazi Germans or the United States or Britain or France or anyone else like the fascist Italians in the entirety of World War II. To make it completely clear how neutral they were in that war, if American aircraft violated Swiss airspace, they'd shoot them down. If German aircraft violated their airspace in World War II, they'd also shoot them down. They'd shoot down everyone's aircraft. They still are that militant to this day about their neutrality. If anyone violates it, they will go to war and fight until the last man to maintain their militant neutrality. It's a very interesting sort of an aspect about the Helvetic Republic, as it's technically called, or what we call in the greater world, the Swiss Confederation. But still, a lot of people have also been talking about, outside of that neutral third-party intermediary, which is the Swiss, and the fact that they are generally encouraging the two sides to come and meet in Switzerland, most likely in Zurich, we have also been able to hear that Medvedev has put out another drunken rant. Actually, let me go get this one really quickly because this one's one that is a little bit interesting. I didn't include it on our news bulletins tonight because we had a lot to talk about, but we will go and get it really quickly because a poll's been run on it, and we want to make sure to give you all the context just in case you all have not seen it. So let me go and try and get it really quickly. And let's see here. Sorry, folks. Trying to get it really quick. It's taking a little bit of time. Got to try and quickly look through everything and grab it. And this is taking a little moment because I'm scrolling through a lot, and it looks like I might have missed it. So now I'm scrolling back up to try and see if I can find it.
So while you're looking for it and things like that, let's go over this poll real quick. It says former Russian President Medvedev, everybody knows he's the lunatic in Russia, he called Zelensky the Kyiv clown today in a post, and he also accused Europe of aggression. And what are your thoughts about those statements? So 71% said that's just a lunatic ranting once again like he usually does, and 24% said that's Putin's real thoughts about the situation, and that's what he's going to run with, and 3% said I'm 50-50 on this one. And I would say, even though Medvedev is known for being a lunatic, he's known for ranting like a crazy person, I would say this is exactly what Putin's probably thinking in private, because the reason why he just mocked Zelensky by telling him to come to Moscow with a one-on-one meeting, knowing that was not possible, he clearly mocked Zelensky. He's also tried to assassinate Zelensky before, and now Medvedev, who's a very close right-hand man to Putin, is calling him the Kyiv clown amidst peace talks, and also accusing Europe of aggression. So I would say that's what Putin really thinks right there. Medvedev is crazy enough to come out and say it, probably because he goes on a drunken rant, probably, I would assume, but that he's the one crazy enough to say it, and Putin is too scared to say it in the public, so Medvedev's the one that translates it on behalf of Putin. So I'm with the 24%. I think that's the real thoughts. But Enforcer, what say you?
Also, really quickly, to read the tweet, just for all of y'all to see it, in case y'all haven't seen it today, this is the statement from Dmitry Medvedev unfiltered. I'm going to read it exactly how it is. The anti-Russian warmongering coalition of the willing failed to outplay POTUS on his turf. Europe thanked and sucked up to him. The question is, which tune the Kiev clown, he also spelled a Kiev in the Russian spelling, the Kiev clown will play about guarantees and territories back home once he's put on his green military uniform again. So it appears that it was another drunken rant by Medvedev. Generally, though, I will have to say that this is most likely an official statement by the Russian Federation's government. As someone as important as Medvedev, who was a former president of the Russian Federation and longtime serving prime minister, now currently advisor to Putin in the presidential cabinet, he does not make statements in Russia without the approval of Putin or the central Russian government. There's no way for that to be done. The Russians are very careful about curating public image and also making sure that statements align with the general theories or policies of the state. For that matter, this is generally the unfiltered take of the Russian government and Medvedev on the situation. One thing that I also have to say, though, is that the coalition of the willing is not warmongering. Saying that the war has to go on because the Russians are uncompromising and they are demanding unconditional surrender and no one should ever accept that is not warmongering. That's just simple common sense. How well did that turn out for anyone that took unconditional surrenders in the past to just maintain peace? Like, for example, the British or the French with the 1938 Munich Conference, or the Anschluss of Austria, or the remilitarization of the Rhineland, or any other instance for that matter, where people will go out of their way to appease a combative country and then see that more war happen. Better yet, look at the Napoleonic Wars. There were 5 coalitions against Napoleon because they eventually would just go, peace has to be achieved at some point, and they would peace out, and then a new coalition would have to be made because Napoleon would push the envelope again and start up a new campaign against a new country somewhere. There were 5 coalitions against Napoleon, and the same kind of attempted appeasement that happened up to lead up of World War II in Europe happened back then, generally during the Napoleonic Wars. That's why there were 5 coalitions. That's why it's also not called the Napoleonic War, it's called the Napoleonic Wars. Because time and time again, they learned that it just didn't turn out. And this is something that everyone should know at this point, just from the contemporary examples of the Napoleonic Wars, in plural, and World War II, that appeasement does not work. And the fact that the Ukrainians should try and accept appeasement to not be called a warmonger is absolutely ridiculous. And this is more so just lunatic Medvedev going on his normal drunken rants again, and just having them approved by the state government. That's generally
the reason why Medvedev's saying that, the reason why he's calling it warmongering, coalition of the willing, is because the part that got him freaked out was when the U.S. President and also the European officials had said that they wanted to deploy troops in Ukraine to have basically peacekeeping forces inside of Ukrainian territory. That's the part that got him freaked out. He also made a separate tweet about that, but I don't have that one available right this second. But Medvedev was shaken by that. Also, Lavrov came out and made very strong statements against it. Putin himself, I think, rejected it on the phone call, but he didn't make a public statement about it. But the one thing that Russia will never agree to, I think we can pretty much bag this one up at this point, Russia will never agree to any sort of NATO troops going into Ukraine to ensure the peace. That is never going to happen. So I hear the U.S. president is floating the idea of some type of air protection for Ukraine instead of troops on the ground, because the U.S. president's already ruled out sending U.S. forces to Ukraine to keep the peace. He ruled that out after Putin stated that he was not willing to accept that. So I don't really know at this point what type of peacekeeping is going to be in place, but it's very telling to me that Russia is so heavily dead set against troops going to Ukraine, because why would they have a problem with that if they had no intention of reinvading? It wouldn't make any sense. The troops are not there to go invade Russia. They're there to ensure that Russia doesn't reinvade Ukraine.
That's something the Russians will never get in their mind, ever, is that the reason why there are Western troops on their borders in Finland, the Baltics, and eventually possibly even Ukraine is because nobody trusts them. It's not that we want to attack them, it's that nobody trusts them. Why in the world are American troops and also European troops as a whole in the Baltics? It's because nobody in the Baltics trusts the Russians to not invade them. We're not there to invade Russia. We're there for the Baltics' protection from a lunatic. Why in the world is Finland now hosting Western forces as well on its territory? That's because Because of the invasion of Ukraine, Finland now considers their national security to be at risk, and the only way to counter that risk is to join a larger militarized alliance that could stand in their common defense if they're attacked by the Russians. Why in the world did the Ukrainians want to join NATO? Because in 2014, when they tried to join the European Union, which is an economic customs union that is supposed to make trade with other European states far easier and spur economic growth, was such a threat to the Russians started a pseudo-war, annexing Crimea and also invading the Donbass as well. That scared the Ukrainians so much that they said the only way we can protect ourselves from the Russian invaders again is to get into a larger and stronger military alliance to be able to protect ourselves from another possible Russian invasion. That very attempt at the ascension into NATO in 2021 by Zelensky, which is on the books, is generally the reason why the Russian Federation started the war. Because not only just several weeks after Zelensky started the ascension process to NATO, Russian forces started building up along the borders of Ukraine and Belarus and throughout the entirety of the Russian-controlled regions. That makes it clear that the Russian Federation always views any attempt at these countries at collective defense within this area against Russian aggression to be a threat to their own aggression, and that they have to defeat that before they can actually get into a larger alliance that generally will be able to protect them. That's something that is incredibly clear at this point, and that's why the Russians are getting so angry about this whole thing, is that they keep realizing that through their aggression and their plans of future aggression, they continue to run people away and make it harder for them to conduct their own aggressive actions against these Eastern European nations. It's
also it's so obvious what Putin's trying to do right now at this point. The tightrope that Putin is trying to walk right now is he's trying to do just enough to make the West believe that he really wants peace, because he knows the U.S. president is dead set on trying to finish this war, because it was something he promised at the very beginning of his campaign, and so far it's not really panned out very well. So the president is very desperate to end it, which I'll say the effort is noble. Maybe the intention maybe not so noble, but the effort is noble. I will give him credit for that. But the catch is, though, Putin is using that enthusiasm on the U.S. president's part to his advantage. He's trying to go just far enough to keep him being strung along, to basically keep negotiating when he knows negotiations really can't get anywhere. And Putin goes just far enough not to cross the line into the point of no return where he can't back out of it and somehow, worm his way back out of a peace. So that's the tightrope right now. And I would say Putin is doing a pretty damn good job of staying right on that line right now. And we'll have to see if it stays that way.
I would have to say it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds diplomatically. But at the moment, I think even if the Russians string out the U.S. like they kind of are trying to do right now, this can only go on for so much longer. I mean, hell, the Russians are either going to collapse before they're able to string out America enough to win, or the U.S. is not going to be strung out long enough, and then they're going to put crippling sanctions on the Russians, which would make them collapse anyways. So I think at this point the Russians are just trying to buy time before they collapse, but there really is no way to avoid it, because based off of their offensive efforts in the Donbass, there's no way that they'll be able to win this war within 2 years, or gain the territories that they wanted to, at least for now, to be able to peace out within the next 2 years, at least in my opinion. But with that, I hope that does address it the best we can. But before we move on into the rest of the news for the night, which we still have massive amounts of news to cover outside of not just the frontline situation in Ukraine and the Russian fuel shortages and others, but we also have to cover some huge things going on in the Middle East, like an entire city of nearly 400,000 people now being completely shut off from water today because of a clerical error in the Iranian government. But before we get to all of that, we do have to make sure to address a couple of questions before we get into that next segment of the news. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night, this one goes to BC Skyman, the channel legend, by the way. And he throws in an $80 donation, and thank you very much, BC, for that support, and it's good to see you in the chat once again. And he said, Yuri is going September 29th to Ukraine, and at what night do you want to do the fundraising? And I'll be out of town this weekend, but available any day in the next 2 weeks. And also, I like the next 2 weeks thing right there. I like that a whole lot, T. But also, yes, we do need to get around to that. We did agree to do that. So far, folks, we've been trying to set this up, me and BC Skyman, for a while. The timing has been a bit of a crunch because we've been busy on the back end with personal things with our life and the move and everything like that. And also BC's been very swamped with work. So we're trying to make this thing happen. So we do need to decide when we're going to do this thing. So Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I would have to say that we could start to kick this off very soon. I also have to say, folks, that just to let you all know, the stream is going to be down from the 9th of September to the 10th of September here coming up in the next month because I'll be away on business trying to see if I can settle up a headquarters, a new HQ 3.0 in Salt Lake. So I'll be off doing that during that time. So I won't be here on air during that period. It's not incredibly long. It's only that Sunday and up till that upcoming Wednesday. The stream should be running again as normal on Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time again. So with that in mind, I think that it'd probably be better to kick off that fundraiser sooner rather than later, considering that we have that little time gap that'll be existing at least during that moment. So I would generally say that the best time to start it probably would be as soon as possible. We could start it during this week or the next streaming week and start plugging it heavily to folks. Because just to let y'all know, in case y'all don't know what kind of fundraiser that we're talking about, this is the only one that we've ever authorized outside of the YouTube Give fundraisers that we run on Sundays. But BC Skyman and Yuri have done some incredible work representing the Lee Spring Army and also helping out American Western interests around the globe. In particular, they actually fundraise, and we mail them off directly to BC Skyman, Lukamed self-sealing bandages, which are then given to Yuri. Yuri goes to Ukraine and then gives those bandages to a specific battalion or brigade. And the last time we did that, we actually, I believe, got up to about over 1,000 or several thousand of those Lukamed self-sealing bandages to the Ukrainian armed forces. So we actually can probably do even better this time again, hopefully, if we plug this a lot in an incredibly long amount of time. And also, I will be giving my own Lukamed self-sealing bandages to you as well, BC Skyman, to make sure to up the number a little bit, because those do a lot to save the lives of Ukrainian soldiers that may have been under some sort of artillery bombardment or under direct rifle fire. So we will probably be trying to start that off as soon as possible, and once again speak about it hopefully every single day or every other day to make sure that people know about that kind of a fundraiser and how to be able to give to that fundraiser. Hopefully we can make it a little bit more public and transparent than last time to make sure that we get even more bandages. So with that, a huge thanks to you, a massive thanks once again, BC Skyman, for not only being an integral pillar of the Lee Spring Army and this community, but also for supporting the channel tonight and doing amazing work, practically a hero in Ukraine, along with Yuri, for getting those bandages and sending them to the folks over there. Y'all are the kind of folks that this republic should have, because y'all go out of your way, no matter how big or small the effort, to try and make the difference. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I'll be going on a trip to Salt Lake City at some point as well, but I won't be off the stream on those days. I'll still be streaming. I'll be streaming from my mobile setup, and hopefully this time the Wi-Fi cooperates with me. I'm staying in a different hotel this time, which should have better Wi-Fi coverage. So I'll be still on the stream the days I'm gone. So y'all will hear a little bit different audio, but everything will generally be pretty much the same. And the Enforcer will only be off for about 2 days from the stream when he goes. So minimal disruption, and that's the way we want to keep it, because we don't want to like start taking off tons of days or something and disrupt the stream, because it disrupts y'all schedule, and we hear from y'all whenever we go off the air, like, where are you? And we also are like, we don't want to get off schedule either, to be honest. So that is the way it'll be. But anyways, enough of that. Jumping into our next super chat, this one is going to go to Thomas Miller, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Thomas, as well, for that $50 support. And he said, thank you for the day off stream yesterday, and you guys are the best.
And thank you so much, Thomas Miller, for enjoying that day off stream. We tried our best to present it. To be entirely honest, the stream rarely ever is set up to cover diplomatic developments and events, so that stream was somewhat challenging due to the fact that we had to figure out how to even show what was going on live. That was a bit of a big issue. Generally, we're more so set up to cover live or developing events whenever they happen, in terms of war, where it's more so snippets or clips that we're able to cover that people are publishing in real time of combat action or airstrikes, like the Iran-Israel war. I would consider that to be probably our best coverage we ever did of a live developing event, and apparently a lot of people agreed, because that stream got 2 million views, and is the largest one that we've ever run in channel history by a mile, literally by 1 million views. So those were incredibly good at. Those, not so much. There's generally other competitors out there, in my opinion, that can do it better, because there's a huge logistical thing that goes on in the background with that, with camera licenses, which a lot of people have. We don't, because we never really use camera licenses or really live feed cameras to show anything, because most of our footage is amalgamated through the day in terms of combat footage and also diplomatic developments and statements from government officials, and then we show it. And that's more so what our channel is geared towards reports more so than the live camera footage. So we don't have those licenses. So when an event like that happens, we're pretty much a fish out of water. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for enjoying it, because we tried our best to present it well, and I hope that it was presented well given everything else that was going on air and off air. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our last one of the segment before we jump on to our news, and we'll get, of course, all the remaining super chats during our last question segment. This last one here goes to Rick Galension, who puts in a $50 donation, a 50 Canadian, that is. And thank you very much, Rick, as well, for that support yet again. And that's very generous of you, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And you said, thanks again for bringing us the real news coverage. And I read today that at the current rate, it will take Russia 231 years to take all of Ukraine. And what have you heard?
And I think it would support Rick Galichin. And technically, it would take them at the current rate of advance 231 years to take the entire territory of the state of Ukraine. But the thing is, though, is that can be somewhat misleading. Let me go see if I can find you a Monte Cassino propaganda leaflet from the fascist Italian government of World War II, because it was an interesting one, and it kind of shows the fallacy that can be made, at least at those moments in time. This is actually the one right here. So something that a lot of people really don't know about is the World War II Italian campaign. Not a lot of people talk about it. Usually when you hear of campaigns in World War II, especially in Europe, you hear of the North Africa campaign, because Erwin Rommel is a massive name drop, and then you also hear of the Normandy campaign, because Erwin Rommel is a massive name drop. Not speaking of any of the earlier offensives like the Polish offensive by the Germans, or the French offensive by the Germans, or the Battle of Britain. Those are generally well known. But talking about the later battles or offensives by the Allies, you generally only hear of North Africa and the Normandy and then European campaign. You never really hear about the Italian landings that were conducted in 1943, because it wasn't something that actually went too well. The Italian landings were at first successful by the Allies when we landed in Sicily. We rapidly took the Sicilian island and then moved on into the Italian peninsula itself. But once we advanced up into the area of the town of Monte Cassino, which you can actually see right here, you can actually see the mountain behind it, which technically was the Battle of the Mountain of Cassino, named after the town of Cassino right here. But nevertheless, this was a huge battle, and also because it was generally a geographical choke point for the Allies, meaning that they had to advance through the Cassino Plain towards Rome, and also towards the mountainous hillsides of eastern Italy near to the Adriatic. We generally met a roadblock, and the battles became incredibly deadly, and were practically going nowhere. The advances were wildly slow. The fascist Italians actually started to use aircraft to drop these propaganda leaflets onto the Allies, and hopefully y'all can see it. I wish I could find a larger one, but it actually shows a skull with a stencil to outline the amount of ground that they took from September of 1943 to May of 1944, which was practically none. And then it starts to show how many years it would take to get through the rest of Italy, saying that the Allies would make it through Italy by April of 1948. And it says at the bottom, speaking of timetables, and also that leans into an Italian propaganda joke, that everything in Italy ran poorly, but at least the trains ran on time, because Mussolini was obsessed with keeping trains on time. So everything in Italy was completely dysfunctional except for the trains' timetables. They always arrived on time, but nothing else could be guaranteed. So it was playing into that joke for a sense. But beyond that, that would make it seem, if you went off this propaganda poster, that World War II ended in 1948, because we finally reached the Alps by that point. The truth of the matter is that we generally took Italy mostly by the latter part of 1944, because something happened. The Allies conducted an amphibious landing around the area of the town of Latina, or really north of that near Anzio. It was the Anzio landing, which started to take the Italians a little bit off guard. And then after that, there was this crazy thing that nobody talks about that happened in World War II. The Italian government ousted Mussolini, and then he got beat to death in northern Italy. Nobody really talks about that part a lot, but that was really the one main thing that actually allowed the Allies to win, is because overnight, the Italians had a crisis once the Italian government overthrew Mussolini. Who in the world were they fighting for? Were they fighting against the Allies? Because the new government was actually pro-Allied forces. Were they fighting for Mussolini, although he was deposed? What were they doing? So the front lines generally collapsed as a result of that, and then American forces rapidly advanced into Rome and pretty much through the entirety of the Italian peninsula. And then at that point, the Germans were actually trying to force the remainder of the Italian army they were able to get under their control to keep fighting, although they really didn't even want to keep on fighting at that point, because what were they fighting for? They weren't even fighting for Italy at that point. But still, still, that's a bit of the misleading thing about this kind of advance, because let's say hypothetically the Ukrainians collapse in a similar way, which is highly unlikely. The Russians could start to rapidly advance at that point. But generally, for now, from what we would understand, it looks like the Russians would financially and economically collapse long before they could ever break through the Ukrainian lines. Also considering the extreme casualty disparity that's being had between Ukrainian and Russian armed forces. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least also showing out the kind of fallacy that some people make making that claim, because the goings-on of today on the battlefield might not necessarily be the goings-on in the next several months. It's always hard to tell, but generally, the Russians still will not make a major breakthrough through the remainder of this war, especially if the Russians are still hell-bent on economic collapse within the next 2 years. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope y'all enjoyed the little rabbit hole about the Italian offensive in World War II. But moving on from that, and on into the rest of the news for the night, we're going to be taking a break from the Ukraine war and all of the major developments there, and moving on down into the middle of the East, because there's been a lot going on in the middle of the East. A lot of people have been saying, what's been going on in the middle of the East? Is it in the middle of the road? And as far as the Iranians, they are in the middle of the road. The Iranians are going through not only a crippling water shortage, they're now also going through a crippling natural gas shortage. The National Iranian Gas Company is now saying we have a gas shortage of 300 to 350 million cubic meters, which is a huge amount of natural gas that they're running in a shortage of. So not only are the Iranian people no longer going to have running water, they're also running out of natural gas for cooking. So they're running out of everything at this point. Most of the vital elements of survival, which is generally food, water, and shelter, they're starting to falter on a good bit. The water part's almost disappeared, and the whole part of the shelter, at least kind of keeping it warm during colder seasons, or even for that matter, just cooking food, that's also disappearing as well. So the whole food, water, and shelter thing is starting to become a little bit unstable inside of Iran. Not only that, but at the city of Khorrambad, or Khorrambad, there's been a huge situation that's happened. This one's actually crazy. I'm not even kidding. In the Iranian government, someone, or some department, most likely the Department of Water Conservation or something along those lines in terms of the naming convention, was responsible, concerning the water shortage, for rationing water to the Iranian public. To keep them alive, of course, because keeping people alive, making sure they're drinking water, it's a fairly important thing. Someone had an error, and they just completely forgot a whole city, which is Khorrambad, which is home to about 370,000 people. It's close to 400,000 people. Do y'all know what cities in America have 400,000 people living in them? Cities in America with 400,000 population. Let's see here. Let's go find out. Oh, so here we go. San Francisco, Jacksonville, Fort Worth, Columbus, Ohio, or Indianapolis. Those are cities with a population just about around 400,000 people. So a city the size of San Francisco, California, was completely forgotten when the water tabulations were made. So they're now without water completely. And it was actually admitted today on state media that there was an unexpected incident in the water distribution network, and they say that several areas of Khorrambad, a city with nearly 400,000 people, about the size of San Francisco, will lose access to drinking water temporarily. The Tehran IRGC also announced there will be a nationwide exercise to ensure self-reliance of neighborhoods by managing water consumption. It is unclear what exactly this nationwide IRGC exercise will look like, and I have no clue what that will be either.
Well, water consumption. It's like water consumption is not really the issue, though. I mean, having water, period, is the issue. It's like they don't have any water at all. It's like the question really is. This is really just like coping, like central by the IRGC. This is really a joke.
I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Also, by the way, Growing Big Bud said there's no way that San Francisco has 400,000 people living in it. Technically, it does. It's talking about like the cityship or the municipality of San Francisco, because technically other places like San Bruno and others are not a part of the San Francisco area. They're technically a part of Greater San Francisco, meaning that the metropolis area of San Francisco is in the millions, including places like Oakland and San Jose. But San Francisco, the municipality, only has about 400,000 people living in it. That's something that's also very confusing as well, because the city of Birmingham only has about 340,000 people living in it, but the Birmingham metropolitan area is actually about 1.5 million. So it's a little bit confusing with how they work all that and the naming conventions and how it's said. But outside of that, This is something that I also am a little bit confused with, because isn't the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps like an armed terrorist force that primarily deals with guns? Since when in the world did they ever deal with water consumption or managing water consumption? Are they going to like start putting rifles up to people and saying, "Don't drink the water, don't drink"? Like, what are they going to do? I have no clue. Like, the,
It sounds to me like the IRGC is going around really to keep the peace. That's what it really sounds like to me, because you don't send out the military to try to teach people how to manage their water consumption properly. You don't do that. What you do is you send out the military to make sure that people don't start getting rowdy because they don't have any water. That's the real reason you send them out.
hey, folks, I know what the IRGC is going to be doing. They're going to be going around managing water consumption by just culling large parts of the population, probably, so that way there's less people drinking water. I think that that's actually might be what they're doing, because the IRGC runs like a terrorist force. They are the people who fund and operate Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Look at how they treat people. How in the hell would they deal with people that are managing water consumption? I mean, that's just absolutely. I don't even know what in the hell they're going to be doing. Either they're going to be putting guns up to people and threatening them to not drink water, or they're going to just be culling people and just practically conducting a genocide to cut down on the amount of people drinking water. Like, it's going to be one or the other. I don't think this is going to be anything that's peaceful and sweet, like the Iranians would want you to think. Also, I like the big heart that they put over Tehran. We love Iran, as they say, sending around the military to make sure you don't drink your water. But moving on from that, it also appears that there's been some other things, like Iran generally, once again, building off of their threats to go to war. As Ali Fadavi, the deputy commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, stated, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' readiness has increased compared to 2 months ago. During the 12-day war, the people witnessed the strengthening of the IRGC's combat capabilities and the results they produced. And it was huge, folks. I'm about to get into how they built it up. It's massive. It's absolutely incredible. But before we get into that, I do want to make sure that we talk about that little water shortage problem that they're having, and the fact that an entire city is now without water. That's about the size of San Francisco. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that? What are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so Iran's now experiencing several major crises at the same time. They're having a water crisis, which is probably the worst that the region's probably seen in a very long time. They're also having a gas shortage as well, and now they're having a huge stock market crash. Oh, it's crashing over 22% in the last 3 months alone. And you may be asking, what does the Iranian stock market even consist of? I'll be honest with you, we might have to look into it in a second, because I'm not really even sure. It could be just complete bollocks, but it's dropped over 22% in the last 3 months. And what are your thoughts? 70% said Iran will suffer civil unrest soon, while 16% said Iran will start a distraction, meaning a war, to make sure the civilians are properly distracted with something else, and 7% said they will get external help soon. And I would say I'm with the majority. I think civil unrest is a natural after effect of this whole situation. Creating a war, that's not going to distract people from the fact that they're dying of thirst. That's not going to do that. So it will be civil unrest, and that's probably why you're seeing the IRGC get deployed around the country, and also that city without water is to keep people tamped down and keep them quiet, so that way they don't start rising up against the regime. Because obviously, not having water is a pretty valid reason to rise up, at least in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
And here's the stock market graph, by the way. This is what it's currently looking like right now. But on the bright side, though, many people, many detractors of our great Islamic Republic will be amiss to mention that there is one small category that actually is growing. It's grain. You're liars! Liars! But beyond that, it's slightly green. This one's dark red, which I think it means that it's imploding right now. So a little piece of the Iranian economy is completely disintegrated. The rest of it's slowly collapsing. But beyond that, though, I would have to say there's probably going to be some civil unrest soon, because the fact of the matter is that when you're running out of water, that's worse than a food famine, where you're in a lack of food. This is a water famine, which means that people are going to start dying off a lot faster, which means that it accelerates civil unrest because of the accelerated speed of the kind of crisis that we're witnessing. So I think that that's going to be the general problem here. But remember, everyone, everyone's lying to you in the West. The Iranian stock market, it isn't actually collapsing. This little piece is growing. So technically, everyone's lying that's saying that the entire Iranian economy is doing badly. It's this tiny little green spot, like that tiny strip of grass that the president talked about that was supposed to be at Al Adid Air Base, that technically was supposed to have been hit, although it was a radome, small little potato kind of thing, a little green area versus a radome, But beyond that, a little green area.
Let's see. What is the main stocks that they have on this exchange? Because I'm curious about that. Let's see here. It looks like some of the biggest ones, I'm trying to scroll down to it real quick to get an idea of exactly who we're working with here. Let's see, top 10 companies by market cap. So these are the largest companies in Iran. It looks like number one is the telecom company of Iran. So
What?
apparently state owned. National Iranian Copper Industries is second. Then they got a steel company. Then they have a Gadir investment company. Then there's Bank Pasargad, something like that. Then they have an iron ore company. Then they have a steel company. Then they have another investment corporation. And then they have a petrochemical company. And then they have another bank. So it looks like their stock market consists of pretty much steel, iron, banks, and investment companies, which really don't really specify what they invest in. So kind of interesting. And also their market cap is in the millions, like $5 million, $14 million, $4 million. So pretty small market caps as to be expected with Iran. Now, obviously in the U.S., you got like $1 billion, I think even $1 trillion market caps in some cases with some companies, but very, very small players inside of Iran.
Oh my God, Matthew, you just made me remember something that I've never mentioned before to anyone.
What?
The Iranians are not only a radical Islamic regime, but I also forgot to mention to y'all for like years now that they're also socialist. I completely forgot to mention that to y'all for the entire time. Most everything in Iran is nationalized. It's technically run by the government in a sense, or it's a national run company. So I totally forgot to mention that to y'all. That's also why everything in Iran is technically the Iran national something something, is because all of it's nationalized. I totally forgot to tell y'all about that. So not only are they radical Islamic, they're also socialist. We have to make sure to point that out to all of y'all because, you know, what's worse than having one radical extreme ideology in your government? It's two. Not only like they're economically extremist, and then they're also extremist in the religious sense. It's literally the worst combination you get. Totally forgot to mention that to y'all for the longest time. But Matthew reading off the names of those companies, I was like, oh my God, I forgot. They still kind of hold over some of that like socialist like diaspora thing that they had going on in the Middle East after the collapse of the Ayatollah and everything in Turkey. Well, technically the Ottoman Empire. But anyways, with that, it is
It's a
time.
rough day when your biggest company. It's a rough day when your biggest company in Iran is a telecom company. That'd be like, for example, that'd be like T-Mobile being the biggest company in America or something, which would be kind of weird because obviously telecom is usually not the biggest deal in a country unless you're lacking in several different areas of expertise. So, and also it appears to be nationalized, like you were saying there. It appears to be. It looks like I'm trying to do some reading here. Most likely nationalized. I can't tell though right off the bat, but yeah, it looks like telecom is their biggest industry.
Actually, technically, it is all nationalized. That's why you'll see, like, for example, let me go back over here really quickly. Like with the natural gas shortage, I don't know why I completely missed over this. The National Iranian Gas Company, like all of the names, like the names of these companies clearly denote that they're nationalized or state operated. And I totally forgot to mention that to all of y'all because there was a huge thing that happened, well, was kind of going on still when they came to power in 1979, in that this is a really big rabbit hole. I'll try and explain it as quick as I can, but it's really complicated. So when the Ottoman Empire collapsed, the Ottomans had actually been the center of the Islamic faith for a millennia at that point, nearly ever since the fall of Constantinople. They had this guy called the Ayatollah, which was the Islamic version of the Pope, the best way to explain it. When the Ottoman Empire collapsed, technically the let me think, what was it called? The caliphate collapsed, and the Ayatollah with it. So this created this huge identity crisis in the region about, one, the world are we as Islamic people? And so a lot of them started to try out all kinds of different things. A lot of them ended up gravitating to socialism during that period of time, from about the 50s up until the 80s for the large part. Most countries that were popping up during that time were all into the socialist craze that had taken over the region. And so when the Islamic Republic of Iran overthrew the Shah and they became their own government, one of their big selling points was that they were going to be getting rid of those wicked capitalist systems of the evil Americans, and that they were going to install a socialist regime that would care more about the Islamic peoples. Totally forgot to mention that the entire time. Kind of like a more minor thing compared to their radical religious philosophy, but still, they are actually radical Islamic socialists to perfectly describe what they are. But moving on out of that, there was also a big explosion in Mashhad today that resulted from unknown means. It's the Mossad. We know it's the Mossad. And that's the end of that clip. Very interesting. Moving on from that, we also were able to hear one last thing. The IRGC has heavily improved their fighting combat capabilities and power because the S400 was purchased by them. Only one. They only have one S400. They bought it though.
Like a trial run or something? Like, why only one of them? Could they only afford one, or is China only willing to send them one, or what was the case?
They only need one, Matthew, because the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is the most competent and deadly armed force in the world. They can take on the entire U.S. Air Force with this one S-400 battery. It's not because they're running out of money. It's not because the economy is collapsing. It's also not because they're out of water. It's also not because they didn't get their ass kicked in the 12-Day War. It's just because they're that good, it only takes one.
Wow, that's honestly, sounds unbelievable.
It's truly unbelievable. It's not like these things have like a bad performance record in Ukraine where tons of these batteries were blown up by Ukrainian drones. It's not like that happened, so we'll just completely ignore that. They bought one of these, so now the IRGC is ready to go up against the collective West, including Israel, one of the best air forces in the region, and the United States, which is the best air force in the world, bar the next 4 countries or 5 countries combined. So I think that they'll still lose. But moving on from that and out of Iran, we also were able to hear that they had their recon drones in the area, and we also been able to hear, as a smaller side note, that the Chinese are apparently going to be unveiling a new air defense system called the HQ-23 in their upcoming military parade, and they're also going to be unveiling their new ICBM right here. Now, if I'm not mistaken, let me go pull this up. Founding of the PRC, October 1st of 1949. That's coming up. Let me make sure. Founding of the PLA. Okay, so that was August 1st, so we've already passed that. So this parade preparation, apparently, if I'd had to assume, would be for the founding of the PRC, which is about a month and a half from now, which is quite a long time for parade preparations. I mean, that's like most of the calendar, like, that's an immeasurable percentage of the calendar year, so I guess these forces do nothing else but prepare to look good at a parade. But anyways, apparently that's what all of these units are getting prepared for, from what I'm able to understand, based off of major national events, which are generally the founding of the PLA and the People's Republic of China. But anyways, moving on from that, and on back into the Middle East really quickly, we were actually able to hear that the U.S. conducted a special operations raid as helicopters were heard over the city of Aleppo.
That's definitely not a silent hawk, that's for sure.
Man, that thing ain't silent, and it's definitely war hawking. We also were able to hear the sounds of the special forces near Idlib as well. Saw a little flash over the horizon there.
Is that a rat right there? Or do you see that thing?
Bruh, first we had Iraq, then we had Iran, now we have a rat. Look at that.
Damn, that's a big rat.
Now the video is buffering.
It broke the video. This rat right here just scared the whole Twitter thing away.
Bruh, that's the giant rat that makes all the rules. Let's go.
Let's see that thing again.
There it goes.
Look, here it goes. Look at it.
Good God, that's a giant rat.
That thing's huge. That thing's like a freaking, what do they call those things? Like a nutria or something.
Yeah, that thing's freaking massive. Also, sadly, we can't see the helicopter yet. Oh my God, I hate that we can't see it. Because if we saw it even just a tad, we would be able to say it was an American helicopter.
Plot twist, the rat was the target. He just got away.
Man, that rat was down there. He was like, oh my God, if they get me, it's going to be the end of whatever's left of Al-Qaeda. It's like that rat is all that's left of Al-Qaeda. But anyways, moving on from that and on out of that area, we also are able to hear that fighting has now resumed in the Baalbek Valley again between the Syrians and the Lebanese. Sounds like a great time. We also were able to hear that the IDF and the Shin Bet, which is kind of like the... what's the best way to explain them? The political party officers of Israel were present today talking about the plans to capture Gaza City. Something a lot of people don't know, actually, is that the Shin Bet kind of takes a parallel role to the IDF, a lot in the fact that political officers in the PLA take a parallel role to the military commanders in charge of those units. So that's why the Shin Bet and the IDF were involved in the conversations today. Fairly interesting ordeal, but they're still moving forward with an occupation of the Gaza Strip. Moving on from that and on through the rest of our news for the night, and I'm going to try and speed it up a little bit, not too much though, because we do have a lot else to cover and little time. We also were able to hear that 10 nations were ready to send deterrence troops to the state of Ukraine, according to Bloomberg today, from statements that they were able to amalgamate. We also were able to see that in Latvia, there was a really sick flyover that happened of 2 US B-1 Lancers, and it went hard. Take a look. That's one of the pictures from the flyover.
Oh, that's very nice right there. That right there is clean. I like to see it.
Honestly, this went hard, very hard. It also flew over a mini Statue of Liberty, or some sort of a. Actually, that's not a mini Statue of Liberty, totally different statue. But it flew over a copper statue that fooled me and made me think it was a Statue of Liberty or a mini one for a second. But look at that, Rafale and B-1 Lancers, pretty sick. Also, by the way, if y'all thought the pictures were cool, the video was even cooler. Take a look at this. Just look at him go.
Oh, looks so nice. Look at that. They got the bones flying right over. Look at that.
Western superiority in the air, present and accounted for.
Maybe next time in Moscow.
I don't think he'd want that. I don't think he'd want that just flying over Moscow. I think that actually give him a heart attack, and the poor old bat would finally keel over. But nevertheless, moving on from that and on into the state of Ukraine. Also, by the way, the Volgograd refinery was hit for the 89th time last night. We don't have video or picture evidence of it, but the firm satellite did confirm there was another fire, and it was hit again. So that was an interesting thing to hear. Also, little side note, this is really for tomorrow's news. There was another large drone attack that was launched by the Ukrainians overnight. You can actually see the clear attack paths and corridors that the Ukrainian drones are taking. But all the footage from these attacks will most likely start to appear tomorrow. So we'll have to wait until then or tomorrow's stream to be able to cover that. Moving on from that and on into the Tatkino region, we also were able to see Russian forces getting hit in this area by airstrikes. The Ukrainians have continued to hammer the Russians in the Tatkino area with AASM-250 hammers, a French-provided rocket-assisted laser-guided bomb. That's a lot to get through, a tongue twister in a sense, but they were able to hit them quite effectively.
Man, they did that little demolition right there in the middle. I tell you what, they know how to use those hammers. I tell you what, call them Bob the Builder, because they're coming in there and tearing it down like Bob the Builder never did.
Man, it's crazy stuff. But we also got to see here, just to show this, some people brought this up tonight, and I'm guessing that y'all may have not been around for yesterday's stream, so I do want to bring this up again, that the Ukrainians did unveil the brand new Flamingo cruise missile, which has a 3,000-kilometer range, that's advertised on the tin, with a 1,000-kilogram explosive, which is about 2,000 pounds worth of explosive mass, meaning that this thing is longer range, at least in theory, than a Tomahawk, and also has more explosive power. This thing is actually a heavy hitter as far as cruise missiles go, but we actually got to see the test here. Look at them go. What an amazing cruise missile.
That's no Flamingo I'm familiar with right there.
Man, I
remember that little trend that was going on back in the day when they used to have like the little pink flamingos you'd get from like the store, and they'd go flock people's yard, and they said you got flocked, or they flocked them or something like that.
Man, I don't remember those mother flockers.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm telling you, I think they might be trying to flock a Russian yard before long or something right here. I don't know why they called it a flamingo. That's kind of an interesting name for the missile.
Because, man, after you end up hitting a Russian target like this, the Russians saying that they're winning the war would be so rich they ought to be eating shrimp like a flamingo.
But a flamingo, does a flamingo eat shrimp?
Yeah, that's how they actually get their pink color.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Really, you didn't?
I didn't know that. Just don't eat the ones with cesium-136 in it, and you'll be okay.
Yeah. Let me pull it up really quickly. The flamingo primary diet. Let me go get that really quickly. Here we are. Let me go get this. Small invertebrate, algae, and seeds. Primarily shrimp. I was told that they get their color from the shrimp. Apparently, some people are also saying krill, but it is the shrimp. That's why they have their pink color. That's why if you ever see a flamingo that doesn't really eat a lot of shrimp, they're more gray or white than they are pink. Interesting fact about flamingos: the shrimp actually have a lot to do with their color and their diet. So interesting stuff with that. But anyways, beyond that, it is time for us to get on into the next clips. That joke was so imbued with knowledge that I should not know, that for some reason I know because of the internet, that we had to go do a Google search on it. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see a ongoing OSHA violation. Everyone knows that at the workplace you're not supposed to climb trees. This guy climbed a tree, and because OSHA is not present in his country, he fell from the tree. Not a smart idea to climb trees in the middle of a war. I don't know what he was climbing it for, but he fell all the way from the top of the tree. So was it the greatest idea? No. Was that avoidable? Yes, if they had OSHA in Russia. That's why they ought to allow OSHA to invade Russia. It would make everyone safer. Moving on from that, we also get to hear of a little bit more unfortunate news. 1,000 corpses of former service members were returned to the state of Ukraine as of today. The International Red Cross was the one who received the corpses, and we were able to hear that unfortunately 5 of the corpses actually were confirmed and identified to be those of prisoners that were in Russian captivity and apparently died in captivity. We're not incredibly sure if those soldiers died in captivity of wounds sustained on the battlefield or died of torture by the Russian Federation, but an incredibly unfortunate and very sad fact to hear about. But still, moving on from that and on into our next bit of news, we also got to see a 50 caliber motorcycle. I have never seen in my life a small motorcycle like that mounted with a 50 cal. I don't know if that motorcycle would even handle the force of a 50 caliber firing and the recoil of the thing, but I do have to say that goes pretty hard. That's pretty wild. We see them here filming it. They're just looking at it, admiring the handiwork as they drive off into the distance, ready to lay down hell on a motorcycle. I've never seen...
That looks so precarious as hell right there. That thing was like bobbing and weaving and shaking and stuff when they took off. That thing looks like if you got up to speed, you probably just like lose control.
I think you probably would. It's a wild... I've never seen anything like it. Usually you mount something smaller, like a medium machine gun or a light machine gun. I've never seen a 50 cal on a motorcycle. But moving on from that, we also have the casualty report for the day, as we were able to hear that one Bobcat skid steer was lost over the course of 24 hours.
That's what I'm talking about. Let's go. We got one Bobcat. Let's go. I tell you what. That's a damn good sight right there. We got one Bobcat on a Tuesday. One on a Tuesday. That's enough for an appetizer. I wish they had 3, though. We need 3 full meals to be satisfied here. But tell us more.
And those are the bobcats sitting in the trees. But those are to be eaten on Tuesday. And it looks like it was actually eaten on a Tuesday. But nevertheless, Ms. Issa, keeper of the record, stated the troop loss for a 7-day average dropping to a 937 or 975 August to date. No tanks or APCs, but high artillery. 209 drones ranks as the 24th highest, tied with July 31st of 2025. And it's now time for us to give a better breakdown of what's going on in this casualty report. 890 Russian soldiers wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 0 APCs, 123 supply trucks, 0 main battle tanks. That's actually shocking. 0 APCs and 0 main battle tanks on the same day. 66 artillery pieces, 209 drones, and 1 MLRS. In general, it does appear that the losses were pretty decent today, not the highest that we've seen, but still decent nonetheless. Moving on from that and up into the Kupiansk front, we also were able to see the Ukrainians continuing to take down drones in this area, which appears to actually be done, if I'm not mistaken, that's the 14th? That's the 1st Presidential Brigade, the Buryev. So apparently the 1st National Guard Corps was redeployed to not the Kupiansk, the Pokrovsk front at the Mirnohrad breakthrough, and we heard that the 1st Presidential Brigade was there, but apparently the element that's still involved in drone warfare is in Kupiansk, or the whole brigade's still in Kupiansk, and the 1st National Guard Corps is not entirely present in its full cohesion, and that may be why the 93rd's there. I'm not really sure. That's actually now getting a little bit confusing. I'll have to do some research on that. Although we might not be able to get the full answer to that because operational security does exist in Ukraine. So we can see them, though, continuing to take
Whatever the case is, this is the Presidential Brigade coming in and smashing these drones like they do in Kryvyi. They throw a rock at it and it goes plump.
I have to say that the Russians are always given the chance to surrender and have a long-lasting peace. But instead, these Russians inside of this townhouse near to Kupiansk have decided to not surrender. And so instead of having a long-lasting peace, they will have a long-lasting piss. Open fire.
And we can see here that the Russians inside of this townhouse did not surrender. And the Ukrainians decided to give them the alternative to surrender, which is a point-blank hit from a high-explosive shell from a 125mm main gun of a T-84. Right there.
I was just told by a man in the chat that I'm deep state Matt. I say I'm not deep state Matt. I have cards. I do not have problem. No problem here. No deep state. Not here. No.
I would have to say that we are neither deep state affiliates. What we really do like, though, is deep dish pizzas. Ah, see, I got you.
I would
there,
like to
Gonzalo.
thank George Soros for this excellent speaking opportunity.
I would
Thank you
like-
so much. A big chance that we say thank you. We thank you for peace. We thank you. We need peace, long-lasting peace.
I pissed my pants. But anyways, moving on from that and down into the area of the Torske front, or the Severonsky Forest, technically, we also got to see the Signum unit continuing to attack Russian forces within this area. And look at that. Holy moly. Nice to see. But that's the end of that clip. And moving on from that, and further on down the line, we will be moving past the cross front and into Donetsk. We actually got to see a Russian Kamaz caught on fire in the middle of Donetsk. Believe it or not, it wasn't hit by the Ukrainians. The engine just exploded. You know, like, it's just unpredictable. Like, are the Russians going to blow themselves up, or are the Ukrainians going to blow them up? This time, it was actually the Russians.
Damn.
Have you ever seen such a thing? I haven't. An engine just exploding
Look,
out
they
of
brought
the
the
blue.
fire department out. I can't believe it, man. They actually have a fire hose out there and everything. They're actually trying to put it out. Although that's a lame attempt to put it out, though. It's like you're spraying the metal, like it's just bouncing off the metal. It's like, how about you spray it like where the fire is actually at, not just at the metal?
Also, you know, I got like a really deep question here. There are millions of people in Donetsk right now that are suffering from a crippling water shortage. Where'd the fire department get that water?
That's a good point. They can always find water when they need it, but not when the people need it.
The water is blue. But moving on from that, and on out of that area, insert laugh track, but moving on from that and down into Mariupol, actually past Mariupol, I forgot that we covered that earlier. Usually I cover the line sequentially from north down to the southwest, but I actually covered that one early, so we'll be skipping over that one and into the area of Robotine, where I have to tell y'all, with a great amount of disgrace, the American flag guys ended up getting killed. Y'all know the people who were actually riding around with the American flag and the Russian flag on their vehicle. Turns out they were actually driving a rare Gaz-71. That's why I wasn't able to identify it. Never seen one of those in Ukraine before. Apparently they're lacking vehicles so badly, they're whipping out these. I'm like, literally, these things would have been seen in like the Cold War, but I have never seen one of these things ever, like at all. Let me go see if I can actually find this for y'all. It's so obscure they don't even have them on Wikipedia with their own independent page. Let me go see if I can get y'all a Gaz-71. It should be the tracked variant. I believe it's built on the chassis of a PT-76. Where the hell is it? Come on. They're going to make it this hard. Oh, hold up. Damn, they're going to make it this hard to... Oh, hold up. Let me see. It's actually categorized. Trucks, passenger cars. Maybe this is a passenger car. Maybe they classify it as that. Maybe. Maybe they do. Full-size luxury cars, like the Chaika. Ugh. Panel vans. Here we go. Half-track. Oh, that's not a half-track, technically. Technically, they don't even have it on the page. I'm not even seeing it anywhere to tell y'all what the hell a gas. So the Gaz-71V was made in 1949. That's the closest thing that we can get. So these things were around early Cold War. That's how desperate they are for vehicles. That's why I wasn't able to identify it. Hardly ever seen them before. But apparently, they were the ones flying the American flag off of their vehicle, and they got blown to smithereens. Everyone who was in the vehicle ended up getting obliterated, and the American flag apparently was flung off the vehicle in the explosion. Apparently, they were hyped as hell to think that America was going to be on their side, and they didn't get to live to see the next day, where America clearly was not that much on their side, at least from what I can tell, but, you know, it is what it is. Moving on from that, we also were able to hear outside of the frontline news and inside of the United States of America, just to quickly cover the diplomatic developments here, that apparently the president told Putin on the phone to be a realist. That's probably the closest I've ever heard to the president losing patience with the Russians. So with that in mind, it is now time for us to move on to the capital of Ukraine, into Kyiv, for our last piece of news. I'm really having a hard time here figuring out what to do because there's no speech tonight. I'm trying to figure out how to break that to all of y'all because I know that's going to hurt a lot of people and break their hearts to hear that. But the Ukrainians did state today, or is specifically the defense minister Shimal said that there will be no sharp reduction in the armed forces after the end of the war, and they're planning on keeping a standing army nearly 1 million to 800,000 strong. We can't play the clip here, but he pretty much says that in Ukrainian in the clip. And so with that, folks,
folks, it is now time for us, 2 hours and 1 minute into the show, to round out the news segment and move on into the second segment of the night, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, is it a fun time. We get to talk about literally anything and everything, except for politics, religion, or climate change. Those are off the bounds. And also if the A-10's viable in the modern battlefield. Those are off bounds. Too divisive, too angering. People get hostile. We keep those away. But we stick to the facts here on the channel, and we'll be making sure to get on into that question segment where we talk to all of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, what a fun time it's going to be. An incredibly fun time. A well fun time. A yippee old time. A fun old time. I was about to say something else. I don't know if that'd be culturally appropriate in the modern day. I don't know if people get angry about that. But anyways, with that, it's time for us to move on into the questions. Matthew, what do you got?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night, it's time to grab all the super chats, the live chats, and the Morse code decoders of the stream. And jumping right back into our super chats, this one is going to go to Andrew Barbro. He puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, Andrew, for that $50 support as well. And we do appreciate that very, very much. It's that support that keeps the channel running. And Andrew said, "Good evening, gentlemen, and all the LSA. And how the hell are you doing?" And take one from the chat.
And how the hell am I doing? I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in here. I'm hanging in. One day at a time. One day at a time. That's what I keep telling myself. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel keep on running. And a good evening to you, and a good evening to the whole of the Lee Spring Army. It's a great thing to know that everyone was here again tonight. We actually got up to a peak of 12.1 thousand viewers and had 83,000 views over the length of this segment. A little bit lower in terms of peak viewership, although actually surprisingly it was a lot higher than I thought it was going to get. Because to be honest with y'all, putting Ukraine in the title as the foremost topic generally actually doesn't do that well nowadays. But still, it actually brought in a large amount of people, a lot larger than I was thinking. We're certainly in the top 50 in America with those kinds of ratings, if you want to call them that. But still, what was even crazier is that the overall viewership actually was pretty decent. 83,000 people by the end of the news segment. Will probably end up rounding out about 100,000 by the end of the news segment or the stream as a whole, which is pretty crazy to see. Those kind of metrics, pretty nuts, really. Quite wild. But thank you once again for the support, Andrew Barbaro. And, of course, it's great to know that people enjoy the channel and are supporting it to help it to keep on running. And we will, of course, take one from the chat. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so grabbing that one from the chat in honor of Andrew Barbaro, this one goes to Hands on Fire, who said, "What type of vehicle was that flying the U.S. flag and the Russian flag that was seen on the video? As I've never really seen it before."
It was apparently the Gaz-71. Hold up. Holy moly. Holy smokes, there actually is a Wikipedia page for these things. Where was it? Hold up. This is the Wikipedia. But what is this attached to? What is this attached to? So there's a fire truck that they made out of this thing. Hold up, folks. Now I got to go down the rabbit hole of finding out where in the hell to find the Gaz-71 Wikipedia page, because they have the pictures for it, but they don't have a Wikipedia page for this thing. I don't even know, but technically, just to get past trying to figure out where the hell the Wikipedia page is for this thing, it technically is a Gaz-71 or a GTSM. When these things started to get produced, I don't even know. I can't really find that at the moment, but that's the vehicle that was apparently flying the American flag and the Russian flag on top of it. Let me go really quickly to this website. Usually they have some information. I can't show it on air, though, because they're selling these things, and I don't know if YouTube would want us to say that. So apparently these things first started to be produced in 1967. So it is a mid-Cold War relic.
That's old as hell right there. And also, weren't the Russians trying to say that this was like some type of American vehicle that was flying the flag or something? Because I heard Russian propaganda channels saying it was like, I don't know if they said it was a Bradley or if they said it was like some other vehicle, but what were they saying?
They claimed it was an M113, but the bloggers that apparently were attached to the brigade that lost the vehicle apparently stated that it was the Gaz-71 or a GTSM. So totally different vehicle. It's not even American. If anything, it's a mid-Cold War Soviet tech.
Yeah, it's junk, really. Just old junk. And also, I don't even really know what possessed them to fly an American flag on the back of it, because it seemed pretty dull of an idea considering they were going into peace talks. I'm not even really sure if that was something that was ordered from the top. That might have just been some stupid group of people in the Russian army doing that, but it was really a lukewarm, goofy idea.
It was a pretty stupid idea. Also, what the hell camouflage is this? Is this the bottom of a swimming pool in the middle of the daytime kind of camo style? Like, I don't even know what the hell that's supposed to be. Like, where, like, they put this thing in an exhibit. Look at this, folks. They put this in an exhibit of a winter environment. Does that look like winter to y'all? Does that even look like it blend in with snow? No. Why?
That's like the moccasin skin or something.
Bro, I don't even look at it from the side. That's the same vehicle in the same exhibit, by the way, apparently. That looks terrible.
That's where the Russians did the best, was up there in the Arctic where nobody was around. They won that war.
Man, we won the war against the freezing cold and the bears because they don't shoot. Like, they don't shoot back. That's the great thing about them. They don't shoot. This thing is terrible, by the way. I just keep looking at it. It gets worse the longer you look at it. Like, how the hell do you even fit in the cab? Look at how small the door is. Like, it's like maybe the size of your upper torso, and you fit sideways, and you, like, stuck your arms out to be able to slip in. How in the world do you even get in and out of this thing effectively? Apparently, there's some, at least in this thing, there's some upper hatches that can open, but I don't see those open on any of the examples present. Oh, they are there, though. So I guess you could get in that way. But that thing is terrible looking. This is the worst looking vehicle I've ever seen. But beyond that, I'd have to say, this is the vehicle that was actually moving around on the battlefield when the American flag got blown up. Everyone cried, and then everyone forgot about it and moved about their day. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, so jumping into our next super chat here, this one goes to LC39A, the channel legend, and he throws in another massive support yet again tonight. He throws in a $135 donation. Massive support, by the way, the biggest one of the night. And a huge shout out to you, LC39A, for throwing in that massive support and also helping to keep the channel running. And he said, those guys driving with the two flags were apparently killed by friendly fire, LOL.
Hold up, friendly fire? Hold up, let me go reread that. This was the blog post.
Is that really the case?
Let's see. And the entire crew that blew up the asses of the internet died with the American flag in the Zaporizhia direction. This is reported by war correspondents. It also became known that this is not an American captured armored vehicle, but an ordinary Gas-71. They were so hyped.
They were so hyped.
Yeah, we get the fly American flag. Oh, we want great success. And then they get blown up. Apparently, from what LC39 is saying, by friendly fire. It doesn't say anything about friendly fire in this post. It may have said it in another one that someone made, but it would be funny. I think, though, we have a clip of this thing actually being engaged by the Ukrainians. Let me go see. Let's see here. We had a post of it somewhere. I don't think we showed it on stream, and I showed it really quickly. I think we have it on our Twitter somewhere. Let me go and spend 7 minutes looking for it really quickly. So, let's see here. Let me scroll on down. I'll take a gander here, because I'm pretty sure there was a video of the Ukrainians blasting that thing, and it had a watermark from a Ukrainian Brigade on it and everything. But I want to make sure that I'm correct in saying that before I say it. Because if it was hit by friendly fire, that's just absolutely clown-level stupidity from the Russians right there. If it wasn't, it still was pretty sad, honestly. The Russians tried that little gaffe, and it failed that badly. So... let me see here, folks. Let me take a little gander. Still scrolling. Oh, here we are. There we have it, folks. We found it. And let me refresh my control room as well. But here's the video again. Yeah, that's definitely a Gas-71. You can actually see that little detached front cab and the weird little deal in the back. And this is actually...
Did you really think that adding the cope cage to it was going to make it seem like it was like a M113 or something? Like, was that the objective behind it?
I think the cope cage was just to protect the crappy little supply vehicle. But that thing's sad, really. Now that we know what it is. But also, this doesn't actually back up what I'm saying. This actually puts more credence to what LC39 was saying, because this actually was published by Russia Today. Like, the very faint watermark is from Russia Today, which may have shown that they were trying to broadcast this as, look at them, they're carrying the Russian flag and the American flag to victory, Blade. And then we can see that the Russian flag was starting to fall off. And it appears they may have already been hit at this point. They certainly were hit. There's sparks flying off. We can see a second hit.
Oh.
So this thing may have actually been destroyed by friendly fire.
Quick, Ivan, stop hitting us, Ivan. You're hitting the wrong man, Ivan. Please stop.
And look at that little thing skitter away.
Run! Ivan's trying to take us out.
Bro, meanwhile, at the Russian drone headquarters,
Ruh-roh, Raggy.
Start hitting their own guys. Man, honestly, what a shame. I honestly, LC39, I think I'm gonna have to lean to your side of the story. That was probably a friendly fire incident, especially considering the Russians published it. That makes it a little bit wild. But still, a huge thanks to you for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able. Oh, apparently it was destroyed by the friendly Ukrainians, from what LC39 was saying. Correction there. But apparently it was. Either way, the thing was blown to smithereens, which is a decent thing to know. They didn't get away with their little propaganda coup that they were trying to get away with on the front lines. They would look at them. But anyways, a huge thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that I addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Marion Deemer, who throws in a $30 donation. And thank you, Marion, as well, for that support, as always, from the longtime channel legend. And Marion said, Putin is playing the U.S. officials, and it's working. Sigh. Now, I will say this, Marion. They actually picked the U.S. president up on a hot mic the other day, and he was basically telling a foreign leader of Europe, he was saying, can you believe that Putin wants to make a deal? That's hard to believe, I know, but he wants to make a deal. I think he knows that it's unbelievable that Putin wants to try to make a deal, because it doesn't make any sense for him to just suddenly just end the thing, because his economy is going to collapse. So I think he's kind of knows that it's a little bit hopeless, but he's trying to do it anyway in the hopes that maybe some rabbit can be pulled out of the hat. But the catch is, though, it's running everybody through the ringer at the same time. Everybody that supports Ukraine is like on edge, trying to figure out, is the U.S. going to really stand behind Ukraine, or are they going to abandon them if they get frustrated? But it looks like they'll be okay. It looks like Ukraine will be okay and be supported, but it's a little emotionally raggedy. I'll tell you that, at least in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that in my opinion, I don't really know. I'd like to give some fair credit. I don't think we're going to pursue a peace deal at all costs. It generally isn't sounding like that will be the case anymore. And if we were, we would have forced the Ukrainians to try and give up the Donbass and possibly created a schism with the Europeans to do so. So I think that for the moment, I guess they can kind of be playing us by stringing us along with the possibility of peace, although there really isn't one. But at the same time, they aren't stringing us along to the point that we're trying to force a peace at all costs. I think, at least looking on the bright side a little bit, I think the president actually did listen to all of the detractors saying that peace is not something to be achieved at all costs, because that's appeasement. I think he did listen to the detractors, which we would have been one of them. And to his credit, he's not going to that extreme to say that peace must be achieved at all costs any longer, like he was saying months prior. But a big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Marion Deemer, because it is folks like you who help us to make this thing possible and keep it running. And of course, folks, I always want to say this as much as I can on the channel. We are politically neutral. I don't try and go out of my way, and Enforcer Matt doesn't either, to condemn or praise presidents just unilaterally and unconditionally, depending on what their political affiliation is. And generally, I have been critical of the position that the current president of the United States has taken with trying to achieve a peace at all costs. And I would like to say that it seems, at least for now, that he may have actually listened to detracting voices like ours that were saying that peace should not be achieved at all costs, and now there is a greater concept that peace isn't worth everything, and peace isn't worth a temporary deal for now to create an even larger and deadlier war later. So I actually will give at least a little bit of credit at the moment. It seems like he's listened to that somewhat, but we'll have to wait and see. But still, I never want to go out of my way to just make it sound like a president's absolutely terrible or absolutely great. We didn't do that with the last one. We praised the last president whenever there was any sort of good decisions made in terms of foreign policy, and we also went and detracted against the former president for any decisions that we believed were not really in foreign policy. So always want to make sure that we're fair, and it looks like for now the president is actually listening to detracting voices like ours, and to that I'd have to say, it could be worse. He could be listening to no one, and he could be still trying to push a peace at all costs onto the Ukrainians, which wouldn't really make too much too much sense, really. But with that, I hope
I heard today that the president allegedly said that if he can't get a peace, and it is what it is, and he said it's also very possible that peace might not be able to be achieved between the two. So the next 2 weeks are pretty much going to tell everybody, but I don't mean that sarcastically, by the way. I actually mean 2 weeks, not the whole 2 weeks thing. I mean like literally 2 weeks. We will know generally what's going to happen, but the next 2 weeks are going to be a little bit of a roller coaster, trying to figure out what's the reality of the situation. Is Putin really going to show up, or is he going to talk or not? I would generally hedge my bets on Putin is not going to meet in person with Zelensky under any circumstance. That's personally where I'm hedging my bets. Of course, I could turn out to be wrong because Switzerland's offering Putin immunity to show up. So that might be so appealing to Putin that he shows up to Switzerland. You never know. But I would say the odds of that are still pretty low. Putin is very, very paranoid, very scared. He's pretty much hung out in the bunker for the last few years. So for him to even go to Alaska, that was a huge step. But I really doubt he's meeting with the enemy, which is Zelensky.
I would generally have to agree. I don't think that he's going to be meeting with them. And I also think that the Ukrainians are going to support the concept of having the meeting in Switzerland, and Putin will reject. I have a feeling that he will. I'll be surprised if he doesn't, or I'll be surprised that if he does accept, he'll follow through. Also, I saw someone say, someone, Jan Prentice said, it's not partisan to say what's right and wrong. It is, because right and wrong to you is a subjective thing, like it is to everyone in America. Because if it was right, and it was objectively the right answer, then we would not have half of the country leaning left and half of the country leaning right on every issue, because there would be a clear right and wrong, so everyone would be on the same page. Generally, from what I understand, one of the few topics that everyone in America is unified on right now is that Putin's not to be trusted. The polling showed 88% of everyone heavily distrusts Putin and views him to generally be an enemy of the Republic, and also a decent amount of people, I think it's something like 70% or so, according to the pollings, are in support of the state of Ukraine and their position in the conflict, generally showing that the large majority is in agreement on the Ukraine war. But generally, though, there is never such a thing as a right or a wrong domestic political answer on anything. And that's also why I refuse to speak on it, because generally, here's my standpoint on it. This is what we've been running off of for 3.5 years. Generally, I believe that people who have larger voices, and I guess these days we could definitely be described as having larger voices to stream, is probably in the top 50 tonight, and on average, most every day of the week, we're in the top 50 to top 30 live streams in America on YouTube. So that's a pretty big voice, and I don't like the idea of people leveraging their larger voice that they have because they're good at one thing, like they're good at acting or we're good at reporting the news, to start trying to shove political opinions down people's throats, because the fact of the matter is that they're subjective, and I don't like the idea of people using their larger voices like we could to try and influence public discourse. I think that people ought to be generally devoid of larger voices trying to encourage them or tell them what to do on politics. I think that people ought to do their own individual research and come to their own independent conclusions, and not really be swayed by people that they feel that they trust or that they generally like because they think that they jive with them personality-wise. So that's why, really, for that part, as far as the domestic political side of things, I don't really like to get into them, because I have a lot of respect for y'all, and I don't want to try and sway any of y'all's opinions. Because what if I told y'all something, and this is what happens a lot and what I see a lot, what if I told y'all something as an influential voice that I think is important, like, vote left or vote right in the upcoming election, and that necessarily wasn't in your best interest from a actual qualitative perspective, and you voted in a way that didn't benefit you. That's not to say whether the left or right is better in making that statement, but it's to say at the same time, what if my voice and my encouragement made you vote for something that may not be within your personal best interests? And that's something that I generally consider to be quite important in trying to stay away from. That's really where the
I would say on our channel that probably I'm not advocating for getting into politics on our channel, but on our channel, I would say the vast majority, I would probably say over 80% on our channel, are very already heavily politically involved in something, because most people that have an interest in geopolitics are usually heavily involved in domestic politics. That's usually the way it goes. And I would say from what I've seen so far in most of the chat, I think everybody in our chat and our streams, our videos, etc., pretty much already know where they're going to stand on that issue. So if we say something, it's not going to change minds, I don't think. I think it would simply either turn some people off or turn some people on to what our opinion was. That's my guess.
Yeah, but I generally like to take the moral principle that we're not trying to sway people with what we say. Because what if we do? What if we do? Like, or like that's kind of like the question. If we don't, there's no harm in it, and there's no harm in staying apolitical for that reason. But if we did do that, then there's some harm possibly involved for those specific people. Like, not to say that y'all would get like put in camps or anything if y'all voted wrong. That's never going to happen. But who's to say, for example, let's say you're a steel worker in a steel workers union, and I tell you to vote one way, and they end up allowing for a decrease in tariffs for foreign imports of steel, and it destroys your specific sector of industry. What if that was to happen? Like, I feel like y'all ought to generally be completely devoid of any of our opinions and go and research things yourselves and make sure that it actually supports your position in this country more so than others, because every person in every interest group is going to come to a different conclusion or a different vote based off of their interest. That's why half of the country votes one way and half of the country votes the other. And I don't really want to get involved in that discourse, especially if we have the chance of changing anyone's minds where they might vote against themselves. And that generally would be the reason why I would continue to take that sort of a push or approach on that topic. But anyways, and also another thing that I have to say, there's like a lot of points. That's one of the big ones to me. But another point is that everybody gets into politics now. Like, you just can't get apolitical coverage of anything. So why in the world should we do it? I feel like we're a lot more unique being apolitical than we would be being political. You can go and find anyone that's political. I think there's like only one other channel that does live streams like we do that is apolitical, and they're considered a breath of fresh air, much like we are. So I generally think that we excel in being apolitical, although sometimes we do get pretty frustrated with the prior administration and the current administration's foreign policy decisions. Sometimes they aren't really the best, at least in our opinion or analysis, but, you know, that is what it is. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and jumping into our next super chat here, this one goes to Just a Plumber, who throws in a $25 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that support and also helping to keep the channel running. He said, thanks to all the old guards and channel legends that inspired the enforcers to keep their path and LLT LLC.
And long live the Lee Spring Army, and a big thanks to you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying this channel and being an old guard as well, Just a Plumber. You were certainly an old guard. You were around way back in the day, in the first month, I believe, and I gotta thank you so much for being here, still with us to this day. And also, I've got to say, I got to thank the entire community as well, the whole of the Lee Spring Army, because you all have been with us through thick and thin. Nowadays, it's not impossible to see every single one of our streams reach above 10,000 live viewers. It's absolutely insane that that's the case, because it wasn't that long ago that we were reaching, maybe 7,000 live viewers at the peak. Actually, as a matter of fact, I'm going to go and do a little bit of digging on that. Let me go to the lives. I'm going to show y'all one from, let's see, we'll pick like in April or March of this year, because I know that our viewership was a good bit smaller. So we'll go with March 22nd. And this is what an average stream during that time looked like. And this actually apparently was a bigger one for the time. We had 9.5 thousand live viewers on that stream, and it only got 93,000 views. And that's actually pretty crazy, because tonight we had a peak viewership of 12.1 thousand, which is about the 2.6 thousand above this at the peak. And also, it's already about to get 93,000 views before it ended. The audience is growing a decent amount day in and day out. Not only that, to look at another one, just to get another sample pulling here, this was actually on U.S. airstrikes on the Houthis, and once again, about 9.7 thousand live viewers. So the channel has grown massively in terms of overall viewership on our streams, and also in the amount of people who are here at the peak of our shows. And I gotta thank and appreciate every single one of y'all for joining this channel, all of the new folks who have been joining us over just literally the past few months, and everyone who's been with us forever, because y'all give a huge reason and inspiration for us to continue to run this channel each and every day. If we didn't have an audience to speak to, it would be really hard to find the encouragement to be able to get on air and talk about the news. But because we find that so many people consider us to be their primary source of news, to the point that a lot of y'all have completely abandoned mainstream news categories, and others, I put a lot of pride and effort into making sure that these streams run like clockwork every single day, the best that I can, at least on the research and analysis side on my end. And Matthew makes sure that he does his best on the more so technical side, making sure that the chats run well, the polls are being run, all that sort of a thing, and also his analysis as well. So a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because we're happy to have all of y'all here. And I also got to say, Just a Plumber, you are an old guard as well. So huge thanks to all of y'all. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And I agree with that 100%. Excuse me, by the way. Also, just for some context, I just got done chugging some water. I had to take some Advil there for a second. I've got a slight headache coming on me for some reason. It's all this talk about the politics and stuff like that. It's like aneurysm inducing, I tell you what. But just want to explain that because I was choking on the water. So just want to let you know I wasn't just choking out of the blue. But this one here goes to Brian Justin, our next super chat. He puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Brian, as well, for that support. He said, thanks for what you enforcers do, and take one from the chat, please, and LSA. great.
Hey, and thank you for a big support, Brian Justin. And of course, we thank you for enjoying what we do. We try our best. And it's been going on for 1,273 days at this point, nonstop. But you know, it's a crazy thing. It's a crazy thing, you know. I remember back in the day when this channel just started in September of 2021. I was completely on my own, and I put out 2 videos. One of them on the fall of Afghanistan, which had just happened, and one of them on the protests and riots in Hong Kong. What's crazy is that I can go back to those videos, and I can tell y'all that they've gotten a lot of views since they were first put up. Let me go to them really quickly. Here we are. Some people actually made it all the way back to what happened in Afghanistan, and it got a 91% like rate with 7 dislikes and 77 likes. And it's gotten 1,200 views. Do y'all know how good that did when I first uploaded it? It got, I think, something like 400 views on its first day, which I was not appreciative of. Because you know what's crazy, folks, is that the channel only had on its first day, mostly because I had plugged it to friends, about roughly 9 or 10 subscribers. Which is not a lot at all. 9 or 10 subscribers, it's a very small channel. But what was crazy is that it got 400 views on day 1. And I did not appreciate that at the time, but those kind of metrics were absolutely insane. Like, unreal, actually, for what I had just done. And I didn't realize it, and this is a big thing later, but 430 views on day 1 divided by 10 subscribers actually, 10 subscribers divided by 430... Damn, sorry everyone, correction. I actually did the math correct the first time and I just misinterpreted. It was a 4,300% viewership to subscriber rate on that video on day 1. Crazily enough, there's never been a video like that again, or a stream like that again, in terms of the channel getting that much viewership to subscribership, about a 430% ratio. None. Did not appreciate that at the time, and I thought it was an absolute failure. So this channel actually, for an intermittent amount of time, I'll actually show y'all here, became a gaming channel. I made this one. This one actually ended up, like, pretty much leveling out where it was. Not a lot of people watched it from that point on. But anyways, then I went on to go and make one for college. That's actually what this was for. And actually, funnily enough, folks, this was actually made right before the war in Ukraine started, and I actually made it about the Russian Victory Day parade and what kind of an impact it has on everything. It was actually, to be honest, a very low effort video. I just made it for the college. It's something that's still private. I'm not proud of that work, and it got no views. So anyways, and then it went into a gaming channel, and I actually primarily covered War Thunder, and I thought that it had made it big. This one's still private, but it got 3,000 views. I was like, oh my god, I blew up. And nowadays that would be nothing. That would be an abysmal video if I made that today. But once again, folks, only had about 30 subscribers at that point. So that was an incredibly good ratio. That was like a 1,000% views to subscribership ratio. Then we started to cover...
Man, you go back about a couple of years before this right here, and I had my own YouTube channel. I was not talking about the war, and I was talking about motorcycles instead. I think it was my 3rd video that I put on the channel. It got like 300,000 views on it. And I was talking about a motorcycle because some motorcycle had like a pretty major recall on it or something. It was like causing a bunch of outrage. So I made a video about it and it went berserk. And all the motorcycle channels started talking about it. So me at like, I don't even know how old I was. I think I was like 18 years old at the time, 18 or 19 or something. So all these motorcycle channels were talking about it, picking it up and showing it and stuff like that. And I was just ecstatic. I was like, oh my God, look, it's like all over the place and stuff like that. But then unfortunately school came around. So I wasn't able to put a whole bunch of time and effort into it. So the channel kind of died with that. But yeah, I had like a 300,000 view video like way before all this stuff right here. But it was like a one-off though. It wasn't like, multiple massive videos or anything like that. But it was pretty neat.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then finally, I started getting into live streaming. And I live stream, actually, with a YouTuber that I'm thinking isn't around anymore. I went to go and try and check on them. It looks like they might have deleted their channel. But beyond that, did some live streams. And then finally, on this stream, right here, look at the date, February 23rd of 2022. I was still a gaming channel. Honestly, wasn't really happy with being a gaming channel. At that point, I was debating whether I should just get back and do what I wanted to do in the first place, which was foreign policy and news developments like I originally started the channel. And then someone told me in the chat, still friends with them to this day, by the way, that the war in Ukraine had begun and the Russians were invading. I could not believe it. So then I stopped that stream 43 minutes in and started this one. And from there, the channel grew from then. A little bit crazy to think, because there was about 6 to 7 months where I was just sitting there endlessly doing stuff, trying to figure out how to make things work, and it was tough for the channel to finally blow up, really technically on the 4th day. Although actually it was this stream right here, actually this one was the one that blew up. These are partially blocked in some countries. I do not know why. But nevertheless, you can actually go back and still see these streams if you start from the beginning and work your way up to now. But it blew up on the 4th day, and then from there it's turned into this. It was crazy though. In the first month, this thing got 40,000 subscribers. 40,000 subscribers. That was actually wild. We've far outdone that. I think we got 120,000 subscribers in July, if I'm not mistaken. But still, pretty wild stuff to think about how far it's come and how long ago that was. Because here in about 3 weeks from now, the channel will now officially be 4 years old from its birth date on September 9th, I believe it was, of 2021. So really crazy. It's been that long. But anyways, a huge thanks to you once again for joining the channel, Brian, Justin, and thank you for enjoying what we do, because we've been at it for a long time. And we always love to know that folks enjoy what we've been doing. And so with that, we will make sure to get one from the live chat. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so this one goes to OUGIUSJ, who said, do y'all think that Ukrainian morale will break? And no, I personally don't think Ukrainian morale is going to break. I think it's going to stay pretty steady. The Ukrainians are doing a fantastic job holding the line. And of course, that is not exactly what you'd call exciting work, because obviously they're having to do a lot of defense, which is very tedious, and also they're having to defend against hordes and hordes of Russians that are poorly trained. But the Ukrainians are doing a fantastic job holding the line, and also they're very confident in their leader, Zelensky, to make sure that right decisions are being made. So I think overall they will be okay, and ultimately they really don't have a choice. I mean, if they decide to like simply say, okay, we're done with this, I'm not fighting anymore, I'm tired of fighting, well, their families are all behind the line where they're protecting. So I mean, they're not going to simply walk away and let their families get slaughtered by the Russians. They're going to keep fighting. So the Ukrainian morale is going to stay good, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
Defenders always have a heavy morale advantage. And so the Ukrainians will have a high morale advantage throughout the remainder of the war because they are fighting for their home country. So that's generally what I have to say about that, is that they will always have a morale advantage over the Russians because the Russians are attacking, so they can kind of argue that it's not their land. The Ukrainians will always have a high morale advantage because they're actually fighting for the very survival of their own family, which might end up getting, shot, killed, or have something else terrible to them happen if they're occupied by the Russian Federation. So generally they have a high morale advantage compared to the Russians, even throughout the remainder of the war. So with that, I hope that does address that live chat well, and a big thanks to you once again, Brian, Justin, for supporting the channel and helping it to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Axum Outdoor Adventures, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Axum, as well, for that support. He said, thank you for what you do, sirs.
And thank you so much for enjoying what we do, sir. And thank you for the support, sir. Because we'd love to know that people enjoy the channel and want us to help it to keep on running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because it is folks like you who have made this thing possible for 3.5 years now, and will make it possible for 3.5 more, hopefully. And so a huge thanks to you so much. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $20 support from Wyatt Kelch. And thank you very much, Wyatt, as well, for that 20. He said, thanks, y'all.
Hey, thank you so much for the support, Wyatt Kelch, and helping us to keep this thing running. A big thanks to you. And I also like that you use y'all. You're either from the South, or you're saying y'all because we say y'all. I'm not really sure which, but a big thanks to you so much once again, and a massive thanks to you. A huge thank you. Thank you very much. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Gunfox. And Gunfox puts in 2 super chats, and he has some days in history about the space shuttle missions. And jumping into his first one, he said November the 22nd of 1989 at 7:23 p.m., STS-33 was a NASA space shuttle mission and the 9th flight of Discovery, during which the space shuttle Discovery deployed a payload for the United States Department of Defense. And also took a question from the chat.
Hey, it's one of those classified missions. Also, that is sick. Look at that. That goes hard. A nighttime launch of the space shuttle. I love the space shuttle.
That goes so hard. I like to see it. I hate the space shuttle doesn't fly anymore.
It was just so expensive, though, because after that one space shuttle broke up in re-entry, I believe it was. Let's see. I think that was the shuttle Columbia disaster. The Challenger was the one that blew up at launch. I think it was the Columbia that actually broke up on re-entry. But after that, they disassemble and reassemble the whole thing after every launch. So it actually became cheaper, at least in theory, to build a new space shuttle every time they wanted to launch one instead of relaunching the same space shuttle. So it completely defeated the whole reusability side of things and started wrecking NASA's budget. But still, these things were
Well,
absolutely...
take the money from NASA and put it towards some golden dome. I tell you what, gotta have that dome.
I wish we put more money into NASA, honestly. They're a really cool government organization. But outside of that, it's still really cool picture. It went hard. And also you can tell that they were doing a mission for the Department of Defense, because all the pictures here never show the bay door. Well, actually the bay itself with the bay doors open. You can see the bay doors are open right there, but they did not pan the camera down to look at it because of course the payload's classified. But still, pretty neat mission to hear about, Gunfox, and I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. So, a massive thanks to you so much once again. And I think a lot of people can agree with me, folks. I think the two government departments that should get more funding are the national parks, the National Park System, and also NASA. They're just cool organizations. Like, they do great stuff. They either are preserving nature, or they're exploring and learning a lot more about the solar system and galaxy that we're in. Both incredibly interesting things, and something well worth study and preservation. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is also Gunfox's second support. He said January the 9th of 1990, STS-32 was the 33rd mission of NASA's Space Shuttle program and the 9th launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia, and TS-32 was, at the time, the longest shuttle mission yet, with a duration of nearly 11 days.
Very interesting to hear, and I've got to thank you massively for the support and sharing that with us. Also, visible is the bay and the town of Luderitz. What is Luderitz? That is a town in Namibia. Namibia. So this was actually taken. Let's see if we can line this up. Namibia. This was actually taken somewhere over here. See, it lines up. Look at that. Look at that. Look, folks, look. It lines up. It lines up. Oh, my God. It lines. Let's see. There it is right here. There's the little thing right there. Geolocation, folks. You see that little sprig right there from the mountains? You can actually see it in that picture right there. So it's the same place. So that means that Luderitz is down there, which the picture lines up. So this is the exact area of the Earth that the space shuttle was over when this picture was taken. That is incredibly
Now,
neat.
you know, I got a interesting fun fact for Gunfox, since he likes the space stuff. I got one for him. Did you know, Gunfox, and this is for everybody else too, that the amount of radiation you get by being on the International Space Station, or even being in orbit and in space whatsoever, is very, very high? Like, for example, if you're on a 6-month mission to the ISS, the International Space Station, you get exposed to about 80 to 100 millisieverts during that time. And just for comparison, the average annual radiation dose for a human in the US is about 6 millisieverts a year. So you're getting almost, let's see here, you're getting decades worth of radiation exposure just in 6 months, just being on the ISS, which is a huge health detriment. So it's actually quite risky from a health perspective to be an astronaut because of how much ionizing radiation you're getting exposed to. And also, if you didn't know, when you fly on an international flight for many, many hours, you're also getting exposed to a lot more ionizing radiation doing that, but not quite as much as being on the ISS, because that's actually out of the atmosphere completely, or for the most part. So you get a hell of a lot more there. So the radiation is a real aspect. That's also a huge aspect if you're going deep into space too. Like if you go to Mars or something, which you can't right now, but you might later, you can get over 1,000 millisieverts just from going on a 3-year mission to Mars, which is a problem that they need to figure out before they try to send people there. Otherwise, they could get killed from the radiation exposure.
Well, you know, they actually have a plan to protect the people on Mars from the radiation. Did you know that?
What is it?
So when they build the shelters, you know, like the little shelters that they always show. Let me show you like the hypothetical Mars colony. Let's see here. Let me see if I can show you. Oh, yeah, here you go. You know, the ones that always show the glass domes, all that garbage. So the general plan is that they'd still build a dome, but the dome would be solid, and then they use like an excavator or some sort of machine to cover it in several tons of soil from Mars, so that way it has some sort of insulation against the radiation. They also plan that you'll never leave the dome, so you'll pretty much have to end up using or operating everything else with machines, like drones or robotics outside of the dome from inside of the safety of the dome to be able to survive the radiation. In short, living on Mars would be absolute hell. You're going to be in a dome that's probably several hundred square feet, largest in ground area. You're going to be stuck in there for years, and every single thing, including the greenhouse, which technically will not be able to use the energy from the sun. You'll have to use special bulbs, I believe they're UV bulbs or something along those lines, to be able to grow the plants with, because that dome will also be covered in tons of soil, so that way the radiation can't kill the plants. So that's the plan. So living on Mars is not going to be as glamorous as they make it out to be in these hypothetical images at all, not even close.
Yeah, honestly, that sounds like that would suck. Like, I'm not really sure why people are so anxious to get to Mars. But it's like, what are we going to do when we get there? It's like you're going to be stuck in a dome. You're going to be trying to make life somewhere where life is not even supported. So, I mean, I just don't get it personally. I mean, I get the fact that some people are like, oh, we're going to outgrow the planet. Yeah, we probably will because the population is going up. But is going to Mars on the uninhabitable place, is that really the answer? Because it sounds pretty miserable, if you ask me.
Yeah, they're also going to have to do that on the moon as well. If there's ever a long-term lunar colony, they'll have to do the same thing, because any planet that does not have an existent atmosphere, it's going to literally be impossible to live on the surface, because the atmosphere here on Earth is actually what protects pretty much everyone from the ionizing radiation, along with the ozone layer. So if you're if you're anywhere where there isn't an ozone layer or an atmosphere for that matter, the radiation is going to be extremely intense. So pretty much, like, to put it this way, at least for now, the only real livable place for human life anywhere within reach is this planet. So it kind of puts a little bit more of a premium on the real estate we're in, because there really isn't anywhere like it, at least within reach of our technology at the moment. So very interesting stuff. But with that, I hope that does address that STS-32 mission the best we can, Gunfox. And a big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, I gotta say, we do appreciate your days in history. I find them very interesting, whether it be about normal history or space exploration history. They're all incredibly interesting to me. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our next one here. This one is going to go to Duncan VR, and he puts in a $21 donation. And thank you very much, Duncan, as well, for that Australian support, and we do appreciate that very much. He said, the fly answering in Zelensky voice about the invite to Moscow. Break out the marmot. And Matt, what is the fly saying? Oh, man, I'm telling you.
And let's see, let's break out that marmot here. Let's break it out. Break it out here. Break it out. Let's take a look. Let's take a look. Oh, hello there. Hey!
Oh, hello there, Governor. How you doing? Big fat fur. Look at that. He's got that big fat fur. He's got that coat on, that Louis Vuitton fur. Look at that. He's doing it fine right there. He drives around in a Rover on the weekend too. Oh dear. Taking the Rover down the frontage road. Oh yes, indeed. With the fur. Yes. What's the fly say?
Oh, man. Well, actually, it's not Hot Dog Man. It is me, Zelensky. And it's time for me to talk about a real peace, a long-lasting peace. But why am I going to Moscow, though? What's up in Moscow?
Oi, Governor, nothing's up in Moscow except for they got flocked with flamingos, Governor. They send in the flamingos. They say give them a pimp cane and send them in. They say, oh my lord, it's flocked with flamingos. What happened here? Oh, this is not a native animal to Russia. It's not flocked with bears. It's flocked with birds. The birds, they eat them on Tuesday.
Ah, yes, the birds, which will be eaten on Tuesday. I do understand a lot about the birds, but I also understand that there are a lot of people out there in Russia who do not consider the Ukrainian people to be a real people. And to that I say, have you ever seen a Ukrainian restaurant? Yes, you have. Now shut up and sit down. Now, also, I have to say another thing that proves that we're real people that should not go to Moscow for talks is that we have our own country. A great country, a wonderful country. And I actually was speaking to the President of the United States just yesterday, and he showed me a map. It was a great map, a great, wonderful map, and it showed Ukraine in the way it is right now. And it was a wonderful map, a beautiful map. The president
Oi,
actually offered.
Governor, why does this man sound a little bit like Zelensky and a little bit like Netanyahu, all in the same line of thinking? He sounds like he's blending together. He's blending a little bit of Israeli and a little bit of Ukrainian, eh?
Are you trying to reference something?
I'm not referencing nothing, Governor, except for the Webster's, the dictionary.
Well, I gotta tell you something. I absolutely love Burger King. Like, beyond that,
Oh, that's your most L take, bro.
Oh, yeah? Well, you want to see something else to sell? Are you regulated? Are you regulated? You can say whatever you want. There's no regulation. Like, that one was interesting. I gotta tell you something. Let me call up my boy. Boop, 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 boop. Hello? Yes, what is it? We've got to bomb Iran. Like, but anyway, it's that.
All of his boys. Like, the whole room was full of his boys, apparently, from what I heard.
Oh, yeah? What did you hear about
Yeah.
me?
You know, behind the cameras, allegedly, there was a whole bunch of Netanyahu's boys behind the camera. That's what the story is. I wasn't there, obviously, so I don't know, but that's what I heard.
I always take my greatest boys. I call them the regulators. I call them
Mossad.
I call them the regulators because if someone says that they don't like Burger King, they take them out. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can. Oh, Bibby, oh boy, Bibby. But anyways, Matthew, go through the script with the whole Bibby thing. Bibby better not mess with me.
Bibi better not mess with my nuclear shit. I'm telling you, he better not mess with my nuclear shit. I'm telling you. And I was like, yeah, Bibi, I can't even do it because it gets so nasty, like in the middle of it. I said, Bibi messes with my nuclear shit, and Bibi said, call the generals. He said, sir, they're dead, sir. I said, raise the army, sir. Raise the army. He said, there's no army, sir. They've been flattened. Oh, dear. I don't even know how the rest of it went, to be honest, but it was damn good, though. I wish we could show that on the air.
I gotta be honest with you. It was a wonderful video. But you know something else? I don't know why I'm turning into the My Pillow guy there. But let me try and Burger King. Yeah, there we go. Okay. You know something else that's great about being the leader of Israel is I don't know how to say Hamas. Like I've been the president of Israel for 20 something years, and I always say Hamas. Like the chickpea thing. Like, I don't know why. I always go down with Hamas. Like, I'm talking about the hummus you get from the grocery store, but I'm talking about Hamas, the terrorist organization. Very confusing.
But I was like, sir, the people are so thirsty, sir. They have no water. They have no aqua to drink, sir. I said, raise the water wells. We can't, sir. They're dry. I said, raise the great value water, sir. We can't, sir. There's no Walmart. We said, raise the rain. We can't, sir. It's a desert, sir. Oh, dear.
I've got to be honest with you. Some people may be talking about the lack of water in Iran. But I got to be honest. Everyone's saying it sounds like Nixon. Honestly, it does. I sound like I'm about to go wiretap him. But beyond that, I will have to say, that whole Bibby better not mess with my nuclear thing. It's tops. I like that one script in Seinfeld, man. Do you know the one I'm talking about where Kramer was mistaken for being, challenged, and that guy was like, "Well, I think that's tops." Like, the way that guy said that. Do you remember the way that guy said that? He was like a famous singer or something. Dude, that made me bust out laughing just the way the guy said it. Like, not what the context of it was. Like, he said, "Well, I think that's tops." Like, he put so much emphasis on the T and the P in tops. It was insanely hilarious, just the delivery of it. But beyond that, I do have to say,
Kramer, he crashed out hard.
Man, Kramer went off the deep end, man. Like he went off the deep end in the show all the time, but in real life, he also went off the deep end. I guess you could say he was still in character, kind of. Maybe, I don't know. But
I don't think there was anything written like that in Seinfeld. I don't think. I don't think the writers would approve of that.
Some people say that that's not in character. But I'd have to say that it was entirely in character. Why? Wiretap the Seinfeld writing room. Like, you'll find out. But also, Brian Blairstown said, I was in the pool! Like, it's shrinkage! Man, that was a great episode. The one where they went to the Hamptons. You know that one, Matthew, right? Where,
like George was dating that woman, and then everyone saw her topless, and then George was like, "Oh, what are y'all up to?" He's like, "Oh, nothing." You know, Kramer was like, "Oh, nothing. It was a great day. I got to see Jane topless." And he was like, "What?" That was. Oh, and then they saw the baby, and then like the doctor said, "It looks pretty good," or something like that. And then he said it to Elaine as well, and then he made it clear that he thought Elaine was ugly. That was a great episode, honestly. A great, wonderful episode. Greatest episode of Seinfeld. Everyone's been saying, "Wow, look at that episode. Wasn't it a great episode?" And I gotta say, it was one of the best, one of the greatest, filmed and based in none other than Los Angeles. You thought it was in New York, but it was not. It was filmed in Los Angeles. Why do you say that? Well, let me show you something. We're going to show a picture. It's going to be transfigurative. The episode where they filmed the rickshaw outside in Seinfeld. You can actually see that they're on a hill. There's no hills in New York City. There's like practically none. Let me see if I can get the right clip. Here we go. Actually, no, that's a GIF. I don't know if that'd be copyright free. Here's a picture. Look at that. They're on a hill. Those don't exist in New York City. That only exists in Los Angeles. They were in Los Angeles filming this.
Isn't that the guy right there that sold the stolen dinosaur eggs to that guy in Jurassic Park?
Hello, Newman. Hello, Jerry.
No, that's not Newman right there. That's that dinosaur egg trader.
I think so. He is, actually. I think Jurassic Park Eggman. I don't think it'll pull him up. I got no results for Eggman. Where the hell? Jurassic Park Newman. This will pull it up. Yeah, there he is.
Yeah, there he is. I knew he was selling those dinosaur eggs that he stole or something like that. That was him.
Bro, I swore, man, that when he got those eggs, he said, "Hello, Jerry. I guess you could say those were lost in the mail." Oh, something like that. But anyways, man.
After I saw that episode right here, not this episode, but this movie right here, I was like dying to get my hands on a barbasol can. I'll tell you what, I was like, I need to make a barbasol can with like a dinosaur thing inside of it. That looked cool.
But you know what's crazy, man? You know what's crazy? The Jurassic Park movie had nothing in relation to the book. Like nothing, hardly. Like I actually read some snippets of the book. The book is nowhere close to the movie, and the movie is nowhere close to the book. But both of them are highly acclaimed, which is rare. Like usually like the movie is shot down, but the book is terrible, or it's the other way around. Like a lot of y'all know of the hit TV show The Boys, which is on Amazon. Not that we're like sponsored to plug them or anything, but just to bring up the specific show. Everyone considers The Boys comic book to be absolutely terrible. Like everyone who's ever read it, me included. It was really, really bad. But the show is actually pretty decent. Like it's like a flip. Like usually it's the other way around. But with Jurassic Park, it's like one of the few where the book is considered great and the movie doesn't even match the book, but it's also considered great as well because it kind of did its own thing and ran with it. So, pretty interesting with that because there was no mention of a barbasol can, I do believe, in the Jurassic Park book, like as to how the eggs were getting out. Another thing that was interesting is that the book was totally different than the movie, because in the movie, they say that they got, like the DNA from that mosquito that was stuck in the amber that was on that guy's cane, and they turned into dinosaurs, right? So in the book, it was totally different. They didn't have dinosaur DNA. They just mutated the genes or DNA of modern reptiles. So I think in the book, it was something along the lines of none of them were actually the dinosaurs they were. They were just freak abomination monsters. And I think the quote-unquote velociraptors were so similar in DNA to the frog that they were based off of that they could asexually reproduce like a frog. Because if y'all don't know, a frog can actually change genders and just reproduce entirely on its own and fertilize itself. It's a weird thing that frogs can do, but apparently the velociraptors could also do that as well because of the
frogs. The frogs, they're turning
into freaking frogs. But the frogs can naturally do that. Actually, like that's a normal thing. If there's not a female in the area or a male in the area, the female or the male can just literally switch genders and then fertilize itself. The thing is though this is kind of the big thing is that chemicals that are sometimes deposited into the waters kind of give off for some reason, somehow, I do not know how to explain the exact science behind it, but apparently you can trigger the hormones inside of the frogs to actually make them change their genders without there being a lack of breeding or mating partners in the surrounding area, which is something I don't really know a lot about how it works, but it actually can happen. So fish can also do that as well, and that's something that's very interesting, is that the Seine, at some point, not too long ago, was actually so polluted that fish, the ones that were able to survive somehow in the river, actually would change genders just out of the blue because of the amount of chemicals and toxins in the water, making their hormones go crazy and making them do that. Really interesting stuff. But anyways, with that, hope that does address that somewhat well, at least the best I can. And what are you talking about? A lumpy pillow? A lot of people talk like that, you know, like Nixon, my pillow guy, Netanyahu. They're almost like all one of the three same character, like do a voice of. Like, there's no real way to make them sound that different. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, so our next super chat goes to Jay Bagwell, a channel legend, by the way, and thank you very much, Jay, for that $20 support as well. We do appreciate that support very, very much. And Jay said, it was great to see USA and Europe at the table yesterday, both literally and figuratively, and also some interesting moments behind the scenes. Honestly, Jay, I would say that went extremely well the other day. I was very, very worried about that, and looking back on it and also rewatching the footage, the U.S. president was being very cheerful with Zelensky, and also apparently he told the vice president not to weigh in at all because it looked like the vice president didn't say a word the entire time that I could see. So they had a whole new tone this time. I would honestly contribute that to the fact that Zelensky wore the suit this time. I think it was something that simple that got him on the good side of the president. And also, there's obviously some changes going on as well with the policy of the current U.S. administration that changed things as well. So thankfully, Zelensky was treated right yesterday. He wasn't, sort of messed with. So I would say it went pretty well. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I'd have to say, I think it was a great thing as well. I think it turned out a lot better than really anyone was anticipating. I thought it was going to be another ambush, and it actually turned out to go well. I was shocked by that, really. I was like, it's going to go badly, and it went well. That's a prediction I was wrong on, very, very wrong on. The president, he was the calmest he's ever been, the nicest. Some people say it was nicer than ever. People went, wow, that's a nice president. And I got to agree, I was actually in that camp. I was like, wow, I'm pleasantly surprised he didn't ambush him, and the vice president didn't say anything. I noticed that he was caressing that couch a lot, though. It's very weird. Stop doing that. That's very odd. But beyond that, I do have to say that I'm pretty happy to see. Also, that was like the meeting of the powerhouses of Europe for the large part. The French, the Germans, and the British all in the Oval Office at the same time. That was a really cool thing to see, actually, as far as the representation involved in that. And I also have to thank you.
There was some power playing going on though. We didn't get to see this part on the air yesterday as we jumped off before it got around to this point. There were a couple of things, and of course it's like small nitpicky things. But when the European leaders were brought into the Oval Office, they brought out like a bunch of chairs from the back room and surrounded the Resolute desk where the president sits. They surrounded the desk with these chairs, like where they were sort of uncomfortable looking, and they had all the European leaders sitting in front of the Resolute desk like they were at the president's or the principal's office or something. It was really a very odd sight to see that. It seems like maybe sitting on the couches would have been more appropriate, but I guess they wanted him to be around the desk. It was kind of odd the way that worked. But also, by the way, like I got to give credit to the Finnish president, Stubb. He held his ground very well because I think the president might have taken a dig at him at one point, and because he was literally sitting right in front of the president, he said, "Where are you, Finnish president?" And he was literally sitting right there in front of him. It's like, jeez, like he handled it well. He said, "I'm right here," and he just played it off like it was no big deal and stuff like that. But he held his ground well. I think he's new over there in Finland. I think he's a new president there, but seems to be pretty much on his game as well.
Hold up, man. Hold up. I gotta go pull up a meme. Let's see. I use this one so much, but if the president had been like, "Oh, the German chancellor, where's the German chancellor?" and Merz was sitting like off to his far left, and he said, "I'm here, Mr. President," and he got up, the president would have done that. He's like 6'5". The guy's a literal, like, I'm not kidding, folks. That man is a mutant. Like Merz is so freaking tall that he's got to have like some I forgot what the syndrome's called. It's the same one that Lincoln had because Lincoln was about the same height. He was 6'4", but he's got to have, I think it's like Marfan syndrome or something like that. The guy is freaking tall. Like, he's huge. Have you ever seen, like, let me go Merz height. Let me go pull it up. 6'6", 6'6". The guy's literally a giant. Like, look at him. Like, let me go show y'all the picture. Look at him. There's Macron, Starmer. Let's see, that would be Donald Tusk, Zelensky. Then him. He's freaking massive. Look at him. Look at him right here. The guy is literally a living skyscraper. The guy, like, if he stood up in that meeting, his head would have burst out of the top of the White House. Like, the guy is huge. Like, honestly though, I respect the height. Because look at him. I mean, like, let's see. That's Schultz. There's Schultz versus Mertz. Guy's freaking huge. Like, I don't know how to explain how people get that tall. But whatever his parents were feeding him, or whatever his mother was feeding him when he was growing up, apparently was the perfect formula, because the guy ended up being 6'6". But nevertheless, luckily he didn't do that with Mertz. But nobody could forget Mertz. I bet you there was someone behind the scenes like Starmer, Macron, Mertz. You cannot forget these people, because they are the most important people in Europe. And also, by the way, whether you like them or not, their countries are the most important for their significance and what kind of position or power that they hold. Maloney in Italy and Stubb from Finland. They're somewhat major countries in Europe, but as far as the position that they hold in geopolitics, it's not as important as the Germans, the French, and the British. They're pretty much the ones that run the show, and everyone else in Europe is kind of with them more so in a coalition if Europe was a separate entity. But beyond that, I gotta say, it was good to see them meeting together, and I also have to say that there were some interesting things that were done behind the scenes. I wish we could show the picture, though, of them all gathered around the Oval Office desk, because that seating arrangement was pretty odd. Like, that was pretty weird. But beyond that, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep it running. J Bagwell, old-time legend, channel guard, old guard, and a channel legend. I mixed the two together right there. You see what I did? But a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, let me grab that picture real quick. I should be able to get it really quick here. A picture of these leaders sitting around the desk. I think they posted on the White House's page. So let's see here. Yes, it looks like they have it right there. Let me go scroll down a little bit extra, see if I can get a clearer picture of it. And scrolling down here to take a little look. Let's see here. Okay, I got one picture of it. I'm going to put it on the likes tab right now. Let's see here. There, it's under there right now.
All right, and let's go take a gander. And here we are. This is the official picture from the White House, showing you the backwards angle and the fore angle. You can actually see... You'd actually see the Secretary of State back there. He looks like he's sweating bullets, honestly. Look at him. The pose and everything shows like, honestly, stress. But still, they had them, like, they're not bad chairs, though. They're actually pretty decent-looking chairs. But this one doesn't match. Like, these are totally different styles than that one. But anyways, one thing that's interesting, though, is that the seating... Notice, folks, the seating arrangement was based off of importance, like who got in the middle. France and Germany are generally considered to be the most important countries in Europe. They were directly in front of the president. Britain is somewhat important, but I think not to say this outright, but I think that some political reasons got Starmer off to the far left, although technically that's the third most important country in Europe that was present in the meeting. Like, it's a little bit weird that they did that to him. Like, he's off in the far corner. Let's see here. Mark Root.
He was back there on that couch, though.
Oh, bro, he's on the couch. Bro, look at that. Dude, he's got that upper lip out, like, far, man. He's going to town on that couch right now. Like, you can't see it because it's a picture, but he's going to town,
He didn't say
folks.
anything. Like, he didn't say anything the whole time. It's kind of weird how he didn't really say anything the whole time. That's why I was saying that maybe he was told not to say anything, because last time he was like a key figure in the meeting. Like, he was going at Zelensky really bad, really arguing with him. Zelensky was arguing back with him. It got nasty. So yeah, he's back there on the couch. He's quiet, not saying a word.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, but he was glued to that couch. He didn't leave that couch on the right side of the room the whole time. Interesting thing to know. Take notes, people. Take notes. The KGB, or actually the FSB, is taking notes right there now. They're like, entice the vice president with a couch is honey trap. Period. like that's what they're probably doing. But beyond that, we can also see that Ursula von der Leyen was off to the left of center. Stubb was also off to the slight right. Zelensky was given a far right position in the seating. Root was given the farthest right position in the seating. And also, it looks like there was a translator here to help out Zelensky, so he wasn't having to listen to English the entire time, because he may not be that proficient at it. So the translator was behind him. And then Maloney was off to the far left, which generally, that seating arrangement kind of makes sense. I guess some people had to end up on the periphery, even if they were from more important countries, because there has to be some people on the periphery. But I generally consider Ursula von der Leyen, if anyone should have taken that far left position, it should have been her. Because while the EU commissioner is somewhat important, at least as far as the strategic positioning goes, the European Union is not that important as a entity. The nations themselves, France, Britain, and Germany, would be more important. So I honestly think if the seating arrangement was to represent importance, Starmer actually should have been center of left. Macron is dead center, and then Merz is pretty much dead center as well. So they would have all been in the center, representing the importance of their nations. But who knows? Maybe the seating arrangement was random. But anyways. With that, I hope that does address that well. And a big thanks to you once again for the support. How about this channel to keep on running? Also, I got to say, the Oval Office is looking extremely gold these days. Like, is this like some sort of like a mafia thing or something? Like, I don't really know, because that's a lot of gold. Like, I've never seen that much gold. Call this a gold mine. How much gold there is in here. Look at it. There's like 9 gazillion pieces of gold. Look at that. It's crazy. But anyways, moving on from that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Howard Mendelson, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Howard, as well, for that $20 support. And he said, isn't flying a false flag, isn't that a war crime?
Technically no, because they flew it alongside a Russian flag. So I don't think it would be in that particular instance. If they flew an American flag only, that would be probably a war crime. But those types of crimes really aren't that big, because the armed combatants are still denoted as Russians. There was a big Z on the side of the vehicle, so it's still denoted as a Russian armed forces vehicle. So I don't think it would have counted, and if it was a very, very minor one at that. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that,
It looks like in order for it to be a war crime, meaning a false flag operation, it would have to be committed with the intent of disguising the actual source of responsibility. So with them having both a Russian and a U.S. flag, they're not disguising it, and they really don't have the intent to really make it seem like it was America. So I would agree with the enforcer on that. I don't think it actually would be a war crime, considering they had both the flags there.
And also they had a Z on the vehicle, so if we're going off of the 3 identifiers, an American flag, a Russian flag, and a large Z painted on the side of the vehicle, 2 out of 3 of the indicators heavily denoted that it was a Russian vehicle. So I don't think there was a war crime present there. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I also got to say, some people are talking about the gold, and I'm going to have to steal a joke from a viewer. I had to say that the government overspending was getting very dangerous, very dangerous. I thought that they were going to go and get the gold from Fort Knox and start using it up as well. So I did us a little safekeepy, and I brought all the gold to the Oval Office, put it up on the walls. No one can touch it. Nobody can touch it. It's safe here. Nobody can get to it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Slamina Evil, who puts in the 20. And thank you very much, Slamin, for that $20 support. They said 2 questions. Why has no other nation joined the war like North Korea has? And he'd think, for simplicity's sake, more countries joining on one side equals more joining on the other. And what would be the conditions for this logic to be applied?
Generally, the reason why nobody has joined the war is that nobody wants to have the economic fallout follow, because solidifying polar positions in the conflict, either directly fighting on the Russian side or the Ukrainian side, generally starts to create a very destabilizing situation, especially if nuclear powers are involved on both sides. The only reason why North Korea directly got involved is because there was a material incentive for them to get involved. They are desperate for food and other types of resources. The Russians have plenty of that to provide, and the North Koreans are incredibly cheap as far as what the Russians have to give them for the North Koreans to be unconditionally loyal. So that's generally why North Korea joined the conflict. Another thing is that North Korea has been sanctioned so heavily at this point by the entire world, to the point there literally are no extra sanctions really to apply, that they might as well be in a go broke or go home sort of a situation. There's nothing really at stake for them. No matter what they do, it can't get worse. They're already sanctioned to the extreme. And other countries don't have that kind of threat over them, like the People's Republic of China or India or anyone else for that matter, or anyone in the West. And also people in the West are concerned that if they join the war in the support of Ukraine, that might start to extend it into a third world war and escalate the chances of a nuclear conflict. So that's why people haven't joined on the side of Ukraine. And that's why North Korea is the only country to directly join as a belligerent in the support of the Russian Federation. It's really weird. Like, let me go look at the Ukraine war section on Wikipedia, because I bet you they're going to have as the belligerents Russia and North Korea. Yeah, yeah, they got Russia and then the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic, which were absorbed by the Russians. And then they have North Korea and Belarus, although there's never really been like a lot of official involvement by Belarus or any at all. So, that's pretty funny, though. Ukraine is fighting Russia and North Korea. This is the only war that North Korea has ever been involved in that's outside of Asia, and the only other official war that they've been involved in beyond the one with South Korea. So a little bit weird and crazy about that fact. But anyways, with that, hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Free Software Channel, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that support. He said, I was just wondering how on earth you guys are so knowledgeable. And thank you for that, by the way. He said, I'm an infantry combat vet, and I could never fill your shoes. And did you guys study the stuff in school? And I'll say, from my end, I'm a political science guy, so I don't know a whole bunch about the specific equipment designations, but I know more of a bigger picture type deal. So the battlefield analysis type stuff, like with the troop movements and things like that, that's definitely the enforcer's wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is generally how the leaders are going to act, how these countries are going to interact with one another, and also generally what's the larger picture. So unfortunately, due to politics, I rarely get to talk about the stuff that I usually am really knowledgeable in, which is unfortunate because I'd love to talk about it. But due to how polarized everything is these days, if I talk about it, it's probably going to cause more fights than it actually helps. So I don't generally get to talk about it. But I study political science with international relations. But Enforcer, how about you?
And I'd have to say that technically I have a history major in college, but I don't want to sound like Kim Jong-il, like where he was able to walk at like 8 weeks, but college was more so a refresher course on most topics for me rather than it was a learning new things. Like the degree just kind of says that I know history somewhat well, but generally I was very obsessed. I'm a very one-track kind of person. And I've always been obsessed with history. Loved history up and down. It was my favorite subject in school. I almost would always make near to 100 in history. Math, terrible at. I would get high C's, very low B's. I was terrible at math. I was pretty okay at English, but excellent at history. Anything that involved history, I was on it. And so I would just read and read and read and read. And the great thing about history is that history covers just about everything. So you can generally analyze and talk about anything through the lens of history. So foreign policy, generally history is a pretty decent guide to how foreign policy would work on a historical level. What's worked, what didn't. Combat, another big thing. Technological developments and how they work. Like, for example, people saying the tank is dead. That's been said so many times in history. And you can go back if you're really good and study a lot of history, you can go back and list off all the times people said the tank is officially dead. And then it evolved and now it fits the modern battlefield. So generally, I just read loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of history. I would sit on my computer all day, I'd read history. I'd get off I would get off work whenever I had my jobs that I had, I would read history. I would play games that were based in history. I would live and breathe it. And then one of the most interesting things though is that I got really big into history. I wasn't big into history up until this point. I remember when it happened. I got a computer and I got the game, and I gotta say, this is the whole reason why this started, so y'all got to thank this video game specifically for the reason. I got and played Napoleon Total War. I was 11 years old when I got the game. It was well beyond my age bracket. 11-year-olds don't normally play Napoleon Total War. But I got it, and it was so interesting to me, the Napoleonic era. I started getting heavily into it, researching and trying to learn everything about it, and then that started to get me interested in other stuff, because I was like, wow, the Napoleonic era is so interesting. I was like, what other eras or periods are interesting like this? So generally, I heavily focus on everything from the 1600s up. I could tell you a good bit about medieval history and antiquity, a bit, but really a lot about everything that happened from the 1600s onwards, especially in Europe. So with that, I hope that addresses that somewhat well. But also another thing that I have to say, as far as knowing history, or generally that sort of a deal, is that also that extended a lot into the military side of things. Like, for example, War Thunder was also a big thing that got me really heavily involved in researching and learning about vehicles, because War Thunder represents vehicles incredibly well, actually, wildly well, and it was something that got me deeply interested into vehicles that were involved in war. So I would start learning a lot about air defense, destroyers, battleships, all that sort of a deal, and that's that was another reason why I got huge into vehicles. And then also I was wanting to get into the military originally as my first life plan. Doing this was the third life plan I had. It evolved a lot over the years, just in a very short amount of time. But I would learned a lot about the military because I wanted to go into the military, specifically as an officer in an artillery unit. So I learned a lot about that. And so all that came together to create what I say and do on air now, and all of the crap that I just pull out of the random ether and start speaking about it on air. And so a big thanks to you once again for support and the kind words, and thank you very much for being in the armed services, because you're one of the folks that I probably studied and will talk about eventually here on air. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to MechTild55, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, good sir, as well for that support. He said, when you have some time, would you tell us history buffs how the LSA motto came about and your eagle avatar, who picked it, who designed it, and thank you.
Oh, that's a great question. A great question. And I gotta say, strap in. I'm going to make it short. But in Chernihiv, during the Battle of Chernihiv in early 2022, there was a Russian Panzer S-1 that caught fire in a field and was destroyed. And a Ukrainian civilian walked up to it and recorded it. And there was a leaf spring on that thing. And I said the leaf springs were obsolete. I was entirely wrong. Studied history up and down. And I only made it on car suspensions as far as the 30s. And the videos I was watching from the 30s about car suspensions said that the leaf springs were going to be obsolete in about 10 years. So I thought that that had remained true, and I thought they were obsolete. So I said they were obsolete, totally wrong. And that video was totally wrong from the 30s. They completely did not note how well and significant the leaf spring suspension was going to be. So people grilled me for days upon days. And so it was hilarious, actually, how much people grilled us. So we were like, dang, it's like, well, it grilled me specifically. So I was like, dang, this is like a Lee Spring community or something. And then someone said Lee Spring Army in the live chat, and it was coined immediately. As far as the Lee Spring Army's flag, the Lee Spring Army flag was actually designed by a viewer named Taurosaur, who still watches this channel from time to time, and he designed the LSA flag. He's practically our Betsy Ross. It was a beautiful design, loved it from the start, and we adopted it as the flag of the Lee Spring Army immediately. He actually has the first print of the flag ever officially made in his possession. We don't have the first print. It's actually him. As a huge thanks and honor for him designing that flag. So that is the origin story of the name of the Lee Spring Army and the flag. And then I also wrote and composed the anthem. Took like several hundred tries in AI to even get it close to what I was wanting in my head. And then it got close enough, and then I had a composer compose it and orchestrate it. It's the first song that plays in the intro every night. And so we actually have an anthem, a flag, a name, and generally the community has like a set of guidelines and values. It's pretty much just the guidelines and values we try and lay out here on the Enforcer channel. But that's pretty much the whole history in a nutshell of the LSA. Also, by the way, really quickly, if y'all want to reference the video that I got that knowledge from, go pull up the Chevrolet car infomercials from the 1930s. That's where I got the information the Lee Spring was going to be obsolete, because I think they said in that video that coil springs were the suspension of the future for everything, and they were wrong. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Foxglow, who puts in a 10. And Foxglow said, do you think World War III is inevitable at this point?
Based off of how everything is going right now, it may have been stalled for a little while. But with how things were just going a couple of weeks ago, it looks like it was accelerating and on the way. It looks like for now it may take a little bit longer for it to start, but I think in the long run, World War III might still be inevitable. And so with that, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Luke UK. And Luke said, I really do love the Intro Enforcers, and long live the Lee Spring Army and LSA forever.
Hey, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And thank you for loving the intro. I actually saw someone in the chat just say, that costs $5,000 to produce, if I'm right. Actually, it took a lot. Like, I think the first thing I made was the Armed Forces medley. That cost $5,000 out of pocket to produce, the composer, the orchestra. Actually, no, it cost more than that, because the composer was about $1,500, because he worked with Disney Pixar, and I wanted only the best. If we were going to have an intro for all of y'all, I wanted it to be best. So it was $1,500 for the composer, it was $5,000 for the orchestra. So the Armed Forces medley is $7,500 alone. And then the Columbia, the Gem of the Ocean, the Star Spangled Banner, and the LSA anthem were all made in one go. The orchestra that time cost $7,500, and the composer cost, I think, about the same, $1,500. So to make those 3 songs, it cost $10,000. And then the Armed Forces medley was about another $7,500. So the whole intro together, when it runs in its full entire length, which is incredibly rare these days, it costs about $17,000. So
Ooh.
Very expensive. Eye-wateringly expensive. It's actually the most expensive thing that I've ever done. That's actually the most expensive thing that I've ever purchased in my life, was hiring that composer and also hiring that orchestra. So I loved it when people say that they love the intro, because it took loads of my time along with the composers to get that all done, and also loads of money as well to put that whole thing together to have it every night. So I love to hear when people enjoy it, because it took a lot of time, money, and effort. And also, Levi said tax deductible. I didn't. But anyways, yeah, I didn't deduct that, me personally. I just like chalked it up to some a personal project I wanted to do. It was a part of the business, but I still wanted to just do it to do it. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and enjoying the intro. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to SC Dear Girl, who puts in a 5, and she said, "We're in of battle, and follow me."
We're the infantry. We lead the way. Follow me. And a big thanks to you for the support. Help this channel to keep on running. Because it is folks like you, SC Dear Girl, who help this channel to keep on being possible and help us to lead the way. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 5. And Andrew said, Putin has no strategy except for self-aggrandizement, and his ego won't let him do anything else. Classic narcissist, and civilians pay the price.
I'd have to agree with you certainly on that, Andrew Honeycutt. That's been guaranteed true at this point. Very observant over the past 4 years. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. Also, C. Moss said, "LOL, Disney, that's insane." Yeah, you want to know something else that's even crazier? If any of y'all have watched the hit show Squid Game, which rounded out its 3rd season finally, the orchestra that actually did our intro that y'all watch in the intro every night is actually the same orchestra that did Squid Game's entire soundtrack. So just to put that out there, we had a Disney Pixar composer compose it all, did an amazing job, absolutely loved what he did with it. And then also we had Budapest Scoring, which is the specific orchestra, actually do the orchestration. And they did the entire soundtrack for the movie Die Hard. They also did Squid Game. They did all of those. I actually didn't know that they did Squid Game. Jay Bagwell told us that, and then we pulled it up, and he was right. They actually did Squid Game. So I was like, no freaking way. So our intro actually, as far as like production quality goes, with the people who were involved in it, was top notch. Like, we couldn't have made it any better if we wanted to, and the price definitely reflects that, to be entirely honest. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kevin Richards, who puts in a 5. And Kevin said, if Europe is buying weapons from USA for Ukraine via NATO, does that mean the USA is paying for them as well? And LSA?
Technically no, because if the Europeans are buying them, they're either paying the U.S. to get the weapon, or they're paying the company to produce a new weapon. So technically, we're not really paying. They actually are paying on their tab at that point. So the answer to that would be no. But I do thank you for the support and help this channel to keep running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 once again from Luke UK. And Luke said, thank you, Enforcers, for the hard work you put in these streams. And LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for enjoying our hard work that we put into these streams, Luke UK, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have another super chat from Andrew Honeycutt, and he puts in a 5 this time. He said, just for fun and the sake of levity, let's talk about the old internet question. Are there more wheels or doors in the world? And LSA all the way. And I would say probably wheels, because for every car there is in the world, you got to have 4 sets of wheels, or four wheels on it, not 4 sets, but 4 wheels. So I would say probably wheels. But Enforcer, what say you?
What about houses or structures? They don't have wheels, they have doors.
What if my mom was a bike? She would be with wheels.
Well, my mother had the wheels, she would have been the bike. but I think Andrew Honeycutt, the answer would be doors, because houses and structures don't have to have wheels, but they have to have doors. So while there might be a lot of cars in the world, all those cars guaranteed have at least 2 to 4 doors, or maybe just 1 in some instances, and not even a guarantee of 4 wheels. Some of them might just have 3, but every single structure guaranteed has at least 2 doors. So I would have to say that there are probably a lot more doors in this world than there are wheels. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Welcome to my Tech Talk. What is there more of? Tires or doors? And I say doors. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And a big shout out once again to Free Software Channel for throwing in a $5 support without a comment this time. But thank you very much once again, good sir, for that support. We also have a 5 from Andrew Honeycutt yet again. He said, should we not focus on fixing the environmental problems on Earth before we try to colonize the solar system? It seems like that should come first.
I thank you for the support, Andrew Honeycutt. And generally, we probably can do both at the same time. I'm never one for saying let's just do one or the other. I'm always saying, why not both? We can probably fix the environment on the Earth with the pollution and all that sort of a deal at the same time while exploring the solar system. Why hold ourselves back when we can do both at the same time? But a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. It keep it running. And so a big thanks once again. And we are on to the next one.
And a big shout out to LSA Sergeant Figment. He put in a 2. He said, LSA at the like button, that's an order.
And hit the like button, folks. That is in order. 3,665 likes tonight. And almost 100,000 views. So far, this stream is doing tops. It's doing pretty decent, actually, considering the peak viewership it got tonight. But I do have to thank you so much for the support. And please, folks, do hit the like button. That is an order from none other than LSA Sergeant Figmwent, as it's written in the spreadsheet. Actually, it was a pretty funny way of saying it, Figmwent. But still, a massive thanks to you so much once again for the support, LSA Sergeant Figment, and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Burnaby Alex. He said the front fell off.
The front did fall off. A lot of them have fallen off at this point. I have to be honest with you. Lots of them have fallen off. Wiretap them. But a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one to go to Robert Krogan and Plazoth, who each put in a $1 donation. And thank you both, Robert and Plazoth, for that support and helping to keep the channel running. And with that, folks, with those 2 super chats, we are now going to move on to our next super chat, which goes to Backwoods617, who puts in a 5. And you like how smooth I did that there? Very smooth. But Backwoods said, out of all the world leaders in the world right now, who do you think is stressing the most and wakes up with anxiety? Honestly, probably poor old Zelensky, honestly. I mean, Zelensky, he's being run through the ringer. He's being attacked by Putin. He's Putin's trying to assassinate him at the same time, too. And he's trying to deal with the West potentially flaking out on him and not supporting his country. So Zelensky is probably the one waking up with the worst anxiety of them all. And you can tell his hair is turning gray already from it. So probably him. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have to agree. I think he's the only wartime leader right now who's actually in the hot seat. Compared to the other ones who generally are in somewhat relative safety, except for Khamenei, he was almost killed. But beyond that, I would have to say it's probably Zelensky, at least in my honest opinion. And so with that, I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you made this thing possible, Backwoods. And with that, it's time for us to get the Morse code decoders of the night and 3 live chat questions due to time constraints. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And our Morse code decoders tonight are Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Nor Pritchett, Erba Garbo, Her Royal Fluffness, Kush, and Kopioterix. They said the Morse says the Russian armed forces just lost 1 of the 2 pockets at Pokrovsk, and it's over for them. Excuse me.
Dang.
And LT LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all greatly for enjoying this channel once again, and of course decoding that Morse code message. It is absolutely incredible to know that the Lead Superior Signal Corps has been getting that correct time and time again. It's actually impressive that y'all show up every night. I'm like equally impressed by that. Also by the fact that y'all know Morse code and can decipher it well. And I gotta say, congratulations to y'all once again for getting it dead on the nail, on the hammer, every single night. So a massive thanks to y'all once again. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, and this one goes to Brian Blairstown. He said, do you think Zapad 2025 will still happen with the current negotiations supposedly still occurring, and will both Russia and Belarus be hanging by threads?
I'd have to say it's definitely going to be happening still, because they've moved the forces into the area, and generally once forces move into an area, it's very, very rare to see that a war game is canceled. So I'd have to say it's still most likely going to be ongoing, even with the situation we're seeing right now. Maybe even in the Russians' mind, to put them in a position of strength in peace negotiations, which generally is completely opposite of normal thinking, but I have a feeling they're going to be working off of that idea, because that's how the Russians work, or generally tick, for the best way to say it. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to M. Puffer, who said, don't forget to cover the radioactive shrimp. And yes, it is true. There's apparently some shrimp that was being sold here in America that allegedly has some radioactive contamination, which is only found in nuclear waste. So it sounds to me like my hunch is someone was probably shrimping too close to Fukushima or something like that. And maybe they got some shrimp that happened to, feast on some spicy Chernobyl or something like that. But yeah, they're going to have next the spicy radioactive shrimp on a treadmill. That's going to be the next one, apparently. But that's a real thing. But Enforcer, what say you?
Honestly, tritium shrimp sound appetizing. Like I like myself.
I think it's cesium-136, actually.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I think so. Cesium is only found in like nuclear waste, I believe, and I believe that's the isotope that was found in it.
Potentially radioactive shrimp. Let's go to this article here. Agency. Let's see here. Yeah, it's cesium-137. What is tritium then? Because I heard that tritium Tritium or hydrogen-3, rare and radioactive isotope of hydrogen with a half-life of 12 years. So it is different. I thought, like I heard, folks, one time that a nuclear reactor here in Alabama had actually leaked tritium into the Tennessee River. It's not an alleged thing; that's actually a fact. I think the U.S. Nuclear Agency or whatever along those lines stated that that did happen. It was like several hundred gallons of it, but very interesting.
Isn't tritium what they use to put in like stuff to make it glow or something like that?
I think that is I think that's radium.
I think that I heard tritium being used for that at some point.
What radioactive material makes things glow? Here we go. And it is tritium. Let's see. What radium? Promethium briefly replaced radium. Tritium is the only radiation source used in radioluminescent light sources today. So once it was radium, and then it was promethium.
I think my 19X has the glow in the dark sights on it. I think it has tritium. I think in it is the element that glows in the dark. So I think that is the case.
Yeah, you know what? That ACOG I got's also got tritium in it too. You know, because it's got that little tritium like thing on top of it that detects the light and changes the brightness of the optic based off of the light intensity. That's something that I actually didn't think of until now. You're right. It's half right because radium used to be it. Now it's tritium apparently, and then there's promethium. Promethium sounds the coolest though. Like out of the three of them, promethium sounds the neatest. But anyways, apparently it was once radium, now tritium, and then once promethium, which was Chad sounding. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least best we can. And with that, we are on to the next ones.
And we actually have two more super chats. It just came in right this second. The first one goes to Christopher Severs, and he puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Christopher, as well for that support. He said, "Thanks for the informational streams each night, and curious why you never say the president's name."
That's a great question. Some people are like Pavlov's dogs, like to put it that way. The last president, we didn't mention his name either, and it makes it really difficult to talk about presidents. But the thing is that we don't mention them because if we mention them, it's like a dog whistle or it's like Pavlov's bell for the dogs to be fed. People start going crazy, and you'll probably see it like right now. I'll prove it just for you. If I say Biden or Trump, but just said both of them, there is going to be guaranteed at least 5 people or 10 people who pop in the chat and just go frothing at the mouth about what they think about the two of them. And that's why we don't really say their names, because if we do, people just go, like, not everyone, but some people just go absolutely nuts. They lose their mind over it, and so we just avoid saying their name. So it's nothing to do with like honestly, I find it more respectful, to be entirely honest, as well. Just to be honest with you, Christopher, to say the president, because some people like to say like Biden or Trump in this very dismissive way, like they're not the president. And I find it a lot more respectful to say that they are the president. It's not really about the person. It's more so about the position that they hold in the government. And that means that they are the president, not, Trump or Biden or Obama or Bush or whoever it was. They are the president of the United States. So I also say for that, it's kind of dual purposes to say it, one, the position they hold, the president, and two, also, a lot of people get very political once we even say the name of a president. So whoever the sitting president is, we just call them the president, no matter who it is. We did that with Biden. We also do it with Trump. But with that, a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling and make this thing possible. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again. And we are on to the last super chat of the night, and then we'll be getting on to the last question of the night.
All right, so this one goes to Wellness LSA Latvia, a longtime channel legend as well. He puts in a $20 donation, and Wellness said, "Hello, enforcers, and 20 for the next song."
Hey, and thank you so much for your support, Willness. And thank you for putting in a 20 for the next song. That's going towards the music fund, and maybe one day there will be some more music. Honestly, though, it's so exorbitantly expensive. I did it that one time, generally because of copyright concerns. To be completely frank with you all, I wanted to make sure that we were copyright free on everything that we did, and everything else could be argued as fair use. So there might not be new music coming down the pipe in the future for a long time. And to be entirely honest, it was so expensive, especially because it was all on my fund and also, like from my personal savings, and I didn't deduct taxes for it. I think the next time that we do something like that. I think that we might have to actually try and fundraise for it if y'all wanted more music. Like, we could do more music. I could pick out a song. Like, honestly, the next one I'd probably do would be God Bless America, because I've heard a really, really good version of it and have been dying to make that one. Or we could make another LSA theme song where it's specifically LSA. Like, I can write up lyrics for it, to figure out how to, like, roughly compose it, and then send it off to a composer to have the rest of it done, and then the orchestra. So we could do something like that. But a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep it running, and maybe one day we'll have more music. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person who put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Knox Day. And Knox said, did we get any more clarification or information about the implications of a security guarantee for Ukraine?
We've gotten some clarifications that there may be no armed forces on the ground. It's some sort of an air cover that's given to Ukraine by the Air Force. Don't know if they're going to be in Ukraine or not. There wasn't really like an extreme amount of clarification on that part, so I couldn't really tell you that for sure. But apparently there's some sort of an idea that we could give them an air shield, although that doesn't really count for much, you know, like it'd be better to have physical men on the ground down there, you know, that could get shot at. That generally guarantees, like not to put it that way, but that's actually how it works, is that they physically could get shot at, and that would force us to get involved. That's why that's a better guarantee than any. Like, aircraft could not get shot at. They could just pull out of the airspace, and then we could say, oh, well, you know, and then leave them high and dry again. So I would have to say that's about all we know at the moment, from what I can tell you, from what I've heard today, but we haven't really been able to get a lot of extra details on what that would actually end up looking like. And also, the Russians completely refused any Western ground forces being in Ukraine post-war, so we also know that there's a holdup on that as well. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for watching tonight. We had a peak viewership of 12.1 thousand people, and an overall viewership of 99,000 people, just short of 100,000. Quite an impressive stream, I will have to say. And I got to thank you all so much once again for enjoying this stream tonight and helping it to keep on running, because if it wasn't for all of y'all, we wouldn't have a stream to run. And also, by the way, one more thing before I go. Christopher, you see that guy right there? Cleaver Cuts. See, I mentioned the name of a president. People like Pavlov dogged. They've got to get political. Like, that's why we don't even mention their names. But with that, it is time for us to round this thing out. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die, and long live the Republic.
And a big good night to you all, and we will see you all tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern on tomorrow night's live stream. So be sure to join us again for that, as everybody probably will anyway. But also, we do have a video coming out tomorrow. Most likely, if there isn't enough news to cover, I believe tomorrow is Andrew's short war video day, if I'm not mistaken. So if there is one, it'll be him putting it out. But thank you all for joining us once again. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, get some rest, and good night.